30 years ago on this day, a seismic event occurred in the political history of Nigeria. Its citizens went to the polls and peacefully as well as democratically elected a president and a vice president. The events of that election, which produced Chief Moshood Abiola as the winner, and the events which followed that election would take the country on a tragic trajectory with a return to democratic governance as the end game. Welcome to our special program, Democracy Day 2023, with the current president, Senator Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration says should be marked low-key with the theme, Hope Reassured. President Tinubu, of course, was a key player in the June 12 saga. I am Ladi Akeredoluale. Joining me on the program is Millicent Walker in Lagos.
Indeed. Happy Democracy Day, Ladi. Today serves as a reminder of our fundamental rights and freedoms as citizens. It's a day when we celebrate the power of our votes, and not just that, the strength of our institutions, the spirit of inclusivity that binds us as a nation.
Indeed, it's also a time when we look back and reflect on some of the very significant events that have led us to where we are. When we're in the present, we take a look at so many things. We are not able to really assess, some would say, see the wood for the trees. But if you take a look back at where we're coming from, then perhaps we will appreciate how far we have come. Even though there are those who will point out, you will also see how far we have to go. And
talking about appreciation, it's also a day to pay tribute to the heroes and heroines of our democracy. We will be finding out lots of things today. Some people have asked questions like, democracies, is it still best equipped to address, the country's most pressing issues? We've heard from notable Nigerians today who have said that they want something new, something different. And this is also with the new administration that we have at the helm today.
Indeed. Maybe that's where we actually should begin. We'll, of course, be joined by our anchors in Abuja in just a moment. But first, let's start off with what our current leader, President Bola Tinubu, had to say about today's June 12 celebration.
The democracy MK Abiola died for is one that promotes the welfare of the people over personal interests of the ruling class, and one where the governed can find personal fulfillment and happiness. That is the hope MK Abiola ignited throughout our country in 1993. On this year's Democracy Day, I enjoy all of us, to rededicate ourselves to strengthening this form of government of free people that has been our guiding light these past 24 years. In particular, those of us who have been privileged to elect into public office at various levels in both the executive and legislative arms of government must recommit ourselves to offering selfless service to the people and delivering concrete democracy dividend in accordance with our electoral promises. On my part and that of my administration, I pledge anew our commitment to diligently fulfilling every component of our electoral pact.
All right, there you have it. President Bola Tinubu talking about democracy. And as we did say, he was a key player in 1993, much younger then. That was 30 years ago. Today, of course, wiser, older. The scars are still there for many people who participated in that process. And as we said, it did have a tragic trajectory. But we're not alone, apart from Millicent and I in the studio, and of course our anchors in Abuja with their guests who will be going to in a couple of moments. We also have a studio audience with us here in Lagos. So let me introduce members of our audience. You'll probably be seeing them on your screen in just a moment. So let's have a round of applause for our Lagos audience as we welcome them. And let me hand it to Ini John McQuarrie, who is
managing the floor.
Who's managing the floor, Ini?
I'm the floor manager. Good evening, Ladi. Good evening, Millicent. And welcome, viewers, to this special program. Well, I think the first thing to do is so we don't just listen to the notable Nigerians. Every Nigerian is important and notable. So we'll get 2 or 3 of our audience members to tell us what they think about June 12th. Is it worth celebrating? The president had said that we need to handle our democracy as a treasure, because it is a treasure. So I'll just go around now and speak to, sir, could you please introduce yourself and tell us what you think about June 12th? We've been celebrating it year after year. Is it worth it?
Okay, sorry. Good afternoon, Nigerians. My name is Bayo Rojigbokon, and unfortunately, I'm sitting with my colleague. I'm a chartered accountant. In 1993, I was 3 years a graduate. Today, I've gone further. I've grown beards, white beards. And for 1993, June 12, it was a momentum time for us. Then it is worth celebration, to your question. It's worth celebration because it defines our democracy that we are celebrating today. Coincidentally, MK Abiola picked Hope 93. I don't know how it's happened. Bola Tinubu, that was way behind him then, also chosen renewed Hope 2023. So I don't know what that means, but for me, it's a reassurance of hope for me for Nigeria. Thank you.
All right, could we give him a round of applause? It's a renewed hope period, as we see. So let's do it now with someone who may not have been conscious, of that time. Let's start with you. So what do you know about June 12th? Is it worth celebrating? What have you heard about it?
Good evening, Nigerians. My name is Ryan Shabali. So I think June 12th, I've heard that June 12th was a very important day in Nigeria, and I think it's worth celebrating because, as I said, it brings hope to Nigeria and it reaffirms democracy in Nigeria. So yes, it's worth celebrating.
All right, thank you so much. So we have someone who witnessed the original June 12 and somebody who has heard stories about the original June 12. Let's do the final one now before I hand over to Ladi and Millicent. So, sir, tell us, obviously, you were there and you saw it, you did not hear about it. Is it worth celebrating continuously every year? And then it seems like the theme of hope runs through most of the conversations at this time.
Good evening, Nigerians. I'm Emeka Ogu, an Enugu-based business consultant. Yes, I was a young man back in 1993 when it all happened. And it is worth celebrating because at the core of democracy is the integrity of our elections. And when in that election, Nigerians across tribe and religion came out and voted. There was so much hope, there was so much enthusiasm, but unfortunately it went the way it did. And why I think it should be celebrated all the time is for that lesson not to be lost on the people of Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So there you go again. Still the message of hope, Ladi and Millicent, and the need to keep celebrating and reminding us of the lessons from that 1993 June 12 election.
Thank you very much, Ini. Wherever you were 30 years ago, you definitely are not where you were then now. So for those...
You won't get the answer from me at this time, unfortunately. I can do it after the program.
All right, thank you, Ini. Okay, now our Abuja studios are also live at this time, and we'll be joined by Chamberlain Uso and Maukwe Ogun Yusuf. Hi, guys.
Oh, yes, indeed. Good evening and welcome to Abuja Studios for the 2023 Democracy Day. Well, yes, just as the president did say in his speech today, exactly 3 decades today. And it is interesting. We'll take you through some of those items, the highlights of some of his speech here today. Good evening. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
Indeed. Good evening. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf, and, well, happy Democracy Day.
Well, yes, indeed. And if we just look at paragraph 7 of the president's speech, how he highlighted some key scenarios for himself, where he says, we can easily recall the sacrifice and martyrdom of Chief MKO Abiola, the custodian of the sacred mandate that was so cruelly annulled. He sacrificed his life in unyielding, patriotic defense of the ideals of democracy as symbolized in his choice. He went on to say that by his fellow countrymen and women as their duly elected president, there was an easier choice for him. It was to forgo the justice of his cause and opt for the path of ease and capitulation in the face of tyranny of power. To his eternal credit and immortal glory, Abiola said no. He demonstrated the time-tested eternal truth that there are certain ideals and principles that are far more valuable than life itself.
Well, indeed, one of the things, these are very profound words by the president. And, one of the things I found very interesting about the speech is also in the next paragraph, where he also celebrated other heroes of democracy, named Kudirat Abiola, who was wife of Chief Abiola, named Pa Alfred Rwani, and Major General Shehu Musa Yar'Adua. Thankfully, there's a monument to his honor, that's to Shehu Musa Yar'Adua here in Abuja. But, one of the challenges myself and Chamberlain took on when we came into the studio was to name every single person on the montage you see right there on your screen. And we're throwing that challenge out to everyone who's following us, especially on our social media handles. If you're following us at Channels TV, if you can name correctly all of the people you see there, in that montage, we'll be very happy to name the first 3 correct entries we get. I'm not going to tell you what my score was, but I know I didn't do badly at all. Come on, I was only 10 years old at the time June 12 happened, and
we took the challenge ourselves.
Yes, Chamberlain did very okay. I imagine that people who were about this age, I don't know, could you vote at that time?
Well, I didn't vote. I couldn't vote.
You couldn't vote.
Of course, I couldn't vote.
You're not old enough to vote.
I couldn't vote, but it was very interesting. Not that I wasn't old, but I couldn't vote. That's what I said. I couldn't vote. You need to ask me why couldn't I vote?
Oh well, you have to know what that means. I couldn't vote. I didn't vote. I can't vote.
They're all in the same category in this instance.
They're not in the same category.
Well, in my estimation, they are. But we took the challenge. And the thing about this challenge is that, look, if you tweet, chances are that somebody else might see your tweet and attempt to just retweet or just copy and paste. So send us an email if you can. Okay, well, you could even hashtag 2023 Democracy Day. We don't mind. But the first few entries, we'll see the timestamp there. So we will look for all of those people. It's kind of a challenge because sometimes when you leave this country and you're with your professional colleagues and they're talking about their countries, you find out, wait a minute, I think I need to do a lot more here and there about my country. These kind of things happen. You never really know. So this, to some extent, I reckon will stimulate you, mentally, otherwise. Do you even know who these persons are?
How much of our history do you know? How much of your history do you know? Every time we sing that the labor of our heroes past shall never be in vain. How many of our heroes past do we really know? So if you see them in a montage such as this, can you identify them? You might know their names, but do you have their pictures in your memory, for instance? I knew all of the names, but no, not all of the faces immediately registered. Well, should I go on and tell them how much I scored? What my score was until I was helped out.
Go ahead, give it a shot, because yes, in this country we could talk and argue about anything here because we all want things to go right. I don't know who doesn't. But when you step out there, it's a different ballgame entirely. Your mindset changes, it switches to you being nationalistic about your approach. And so this challenge, I want to see how we all perform out there. Gen Z or whichever one you fit into, give this a shot. We're waiting on you for that one now. So that said, we'll just go right ahead and bring in our panel of analysts and guests here today to take us through our focus in this first instance here today, the 2023 Democracy Day. And we've got Dr. Yunus Otanko, Chief Spokesperson, Labour Party Presidential Campaign Council right here. And sitting beside him is Ali, member, Presidential Transition Committee for the Presidential Committee. Gentlemen, good evening, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Well, we have two other gentlemen. Professor Khalifa Dikwa is a professor of social linguistics and international relations. He is Dean Borno Concerned Elders, Shatima Emeritus of Dikwa and Kanuris in Diaspora. He joins us from our studios in Maiduguri. We'll also have Chief Ayo Badokun, chieftain of NADECO, that's a National Democratic Coalition, who will also be joining us virtually. So we'll go to them in good time. But gentlemen, good to see you both today.
Thank you. It's good to be here, away from sunrise. It's different.
What does that mean, away from sunrise?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, somebody wants sunset now, doesn't it?
That's a sunset.
Okay, we hear you, no problem. We're all here together anyway, so whichever way. But gentlemen, I mean, today, a unique day in the history of this country. So voting, elections, all things in that regard features at this point in time when people exercise their democratic rights. And so, I mean, if you cast your mind back to June 12, 1993, that scenario was completely different from what we do have today. I mean, at that time, even if you go through the visuals, the tapes, the materials, you see it on TV, you see how people, the passion was just there. It didn't matter who anybody was. The only thing was people were so excited just to go out there and vote. You could queue behind your enemy or your landlord. Nobody cared. And they were even teasing themselves as though you're watching football match. We saw the proper spirit of sportsmanship, you know, as we wish you could see it in football with the finals of UEFA Champions League. But gentlemen, I mean, comparing that time and now, we know there are two different eras and scenarios right there. Dr. Tanko, let me start with you. Yeah. So looking through, taking yourself back in time and then now, how does that make you feel?
You can see me smiling. It takes a lot of historical nostalgia out of me. Behind you, the nostalgia that you mentioned, I think I could do almost up to 100%. But I wouldn't mention it because everybody would have just picked it up already. Yeah. But going memory lane, in that year, we were, of course, we've come of age, so we were able to know exactly who we wanted. We are in Indiaraba. It's a Hausa-dominated area. The Hausa-dominated areas, this issue of tribal and religion was almost playing out. But the younger generation, as at that time, decided, because we had Tofa, remember, and we have MKO Abiola, who we saw as a giver, who was already a building block within the Nigerian people and the youth, in defense of his religion and his tribe. So all the youth in Idiaraba, who are Hausa-dominated, decided that we are going to vote for MKO Abiola. That was where I started my struggle. So it was an option A4. It was so beautiful. So, and our fathers, they're like, what's wrong with these boys? You're supposed to queue behind Tufa for crying out loud. Where are you? So they saw us en masse, like it was like a wind. We just queued behind MKO Abiola. And then when they were counting, it was almost in hundreds. We were like, everyone was like, come back and no, sir. This is where we are standing. And we stood and we voted for MKO Abiola. All of us. It was devoid of whether you are Yoruba, Hausa, or anybody. We were queuing behind MKO Abiola because we believed that MKO was going to give us that kind of, it was kind of repatriate all of those things that have been taken away from our country and bring it back home. We were excited. And so the whole place was agog with the result. Remember, also, Tofa also lost in his front of his own polling unit in Kano. That's to tell you the level of which democracy was at its peak in that particular period of time. And then, today I read something on the newspaper. Of course, it was accredited to the president that saying that sore losers will not be celebrated, if I can remember, if I'm getting the caption on this day newspaper. And I said, all of this thing about democracy, all of these people that you saw behind fought for democracy, and today they are being celebrated. For us in the Labour Party and the obedient movement, we are fighting for democracy right now. And we know, we believe that tomorrow will be celebrated. Because we are fighting for what is just and what is right and the due process. And so, democracy is something that people need to fight for when you are fighting for the right things to be done at the right time. And so today, as we celebrate these particular heroes, some of us who have been agitating for June 12 to be pronounced and all, it has been pronounced now. It was a long struggle. I know Chamberlains, we've been here together and all. By now, we should have been in Lagos. If it has not been pronounced, we'll have been on the streets. But today, we're no more on the streets. We're only celebrating and enjoying ourselves. That the democracy and the people that lost their lives, a lot of our comrades lost their life in this struggle. They are now will be smiling. And yes, we've already achieved it. Let's achieve better things again. Democracy is one of the best, beautiful kinds of leadership that I believe strongly in. Because somebody who is nobody will become somebody.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's very important to state that, the pictures you see here are just representative of the people who, struggled to actualize democracy in our country.
Sure. I can see my mentor, Ganifa, you mean?
Yes.
I do not see Balada Musa anyway, but I see Umar.
Yeah, the list is certainly longer than, what we're seeing here. I mean, even the fact that Kudirat, Abiola, Alfred Rwani, who were mentioned in the president's speech, are not here, immediately tells us that, the list is not exactly complete. It's just a representative number of people we've put on there. But let me come to you, Mr. Ali. I mean, it's Democracy Day. As he said, it's been a long struggle for us to get here, to get this day named, Democracy Day, June 12, and what it represents. For you, do you think that, given the sort of elections that we've just had, the rancorous nature, which the president, of course, acknowledged in his speech, would you say that we've truly carried on the spirit of democracy as exemplified by June 12 for us to be able to celebrate in a manner that's befitting today?
Well, I think we have, in a way, managed to keep the spirit of June 12 alive and also further deepen the culture of democracy. When people talk about June 12, a lot of people, especially, I think, Chamberlain fleetingly made reference to, I think, the Gen Z. Most of them were not there. Even millennials were not there when it happened. 30 years ago, how Nigerians came together to disregard the usual sentiments, the usual suspects underlying our underbelly as a nation, and voted a ticket that today is being celebrated, that has been reenacted again, the same fate ticket. 30 years ago, Nigeria wasn't certainly as rancorous as it is now, as the nation is now. 30 years ago, for example, the social media wasn't in the mix. And then 30 years ago, it was an unwilling military junta that conducted the election that has lost legitimacy. And Nigerians were anxious to see the end of military rule. And in came Abiola. And Abiola, Kingibe ticket certainly was a mismatch with the Tofa,
Abiola?
With the Tofa and the other gentleman that ran along with Tofa, Charles Ugo.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember. Because 30 years ago, incidentally, I was in the media already, heading the news desk. I remember very well in my state-run paper in Kano. And incidentally, the ticket of Abiola Kingibe was mismatched with that of little-known Tofa with Ugo. And when they ran, it was clear that they were going to coast to victory against the permutation of the military junta at the time. Because the military junta at the time had experimented with the cancellation of the primaries that saw two of the, at that time in 1992, who you could say they were political colossus in their own right. Ademochi Roma was coasting to victory along with Umar Shinkafi on the NRC ticket, the defunct National Republican Convention, and the SDP ticket had Shehu Musa Iradua, a clear winner. And then the military junta at the time, people say that it was unwilling to go. And went into, well, like magicians, they go into their hat, pull out a rabbit of cancellation of the primaries. And that's how suddenly Abiola, who, God rest his soul, who had connected with significant number of Nigerians across the divides. Abiola, and that's why Abiola, giving his massive appeal, Abiola identified with a lot of Nigerians, irrespective of ethnicity or religion. And he connected with a lot of people across the Niger, all over. He was a national figure. He related to everyone, answering every call, attending to every ceremony, so long he's invited. So he was a mismatch to the late Tofa. Tofa coming from Kano, and that's why he lost even his word.
So yes, indeed, that's part of history.
Yes,
but I'm asking, you know, how we've kept up that spirit till today, especially coming on the back of the elections which we've had. If you say yes, we've kept the spirit, the question will be how?
Yeah, we kept this. First, let's look at the ticket that brought in Abiola. My goodness.
President Tinubu?
Tinubu and Kashin Chatima. Same fate ticket. And people identify with that because they know way back 30 years ago, the struggle is to have democracy. No matter how some people say flawed the elections were, not this one in February 2015, the struggle to see that people are given the right to choose their leaders over time, as opposed to when someone will sit and then impose candidates. We've seen that happen. There was an instance in 2007. People were not, people were declared winners before the elections were even conducted in some places. Even the beneficiary of that election in 2007 actually acknowledged that the election itself was flawed. So if you look at it from that perspective, you will say, yes, and that the subsequent election, every time we improve on previous election.
You share the same view?
No, I don't. Completely not. Because if we have kept that faith, look at the quality of election as at that time. Look at the euphoria, look at the mobilization, look at the way in which the youths really came out. As I just gave you an example, if you like playing the tape right in my front now, it was almost replica of what we'll have seen on February 25th. Because a lot of people were giving a lot of hope. People travel outside the country to come in. And, you know, prior to that, we've had election in Edo and Ondo, which have seemingly shown that there's a clear improvement in our election and then built a lot of hope. That is the reason why majority of the youth who were not even interested in our politics at that time started coming in and showing interest. But we bundled that particular hope on the 25th of February. If we had made those particular results the way it turns out to be, many of our young ones will have had more solid hope. A lot of people want to believe that, look, it was a deliberate attempt to bundle the processes of the election. Yes, there may be improvement in terms of the processes and the Electoral Act that was being said and all of those ones that raising the hope of the people to that particular level.
Yeah,
but it was dashed.
Okay, so perhaps that's where I'd like to just like you to shed a little more light on, because when you give that impression, yes, because when you both relived your experience, what it was at that time, of course, you know, there are many who their experience or how they want to, at least, you mesh them in that era with your explanations. Now, when you talk about what transpired in the last elections and previously, and then you say, well, maybe not exactly all, but some areas.
Yes.
So where are those areas? What exactly is it that you think we can do to be able to at least, if not match what transpired in 1993?
Okay. In the areas of terms of advocacy and terms of the Electoral Act, we need to fine-tune it. The Nigerian people want to see where politicians can stay put in where they said they belong to. Like the issue of, cross-carpeting and all of those things. It hurts them a lot. And then the fact that if you say ABC vote, put the result of that ABC and they are satisfied with it. When they don't see that, they believe that, okay, there's always a manipulation, that there is a power to be somewhere that decide who become who in this country.
You know, part of why I raise that is because At that time,
Yes.
and both of you could respond to, I don't think we had as much electoral reforms as we have now.
Yes.
At that time.
Yes.
So what was the difference?
Good. Probably the faith in the people and then those who are handling our electoral election at that time. Maybe they still have their heads on their neck. And so they were ready to do the right thing. Okay? So, but here we have manipulation, intimidations, and all came into being. Just like what is almost happening at the National Assembly just recently now. The democracy that we know, yes, political party can decide or decide among them and say, this is where we want you to go. But election and voting for the candidate stopped at the national anthem. But you can see what horse trading is between Yari and Akpabio. It's happening between Attitudinal and all of those ones. People are not allowed to really ventilate those people that they want them to vote. And that did not take place in that particular era.
Well, some people will say that that's the idea behind the democracy, that people will horse trade, they will canvass for votes. And it's one way of canvassing for votes. But what I would like to ask is, I mean, looking at the president's speech when he said that the abortion by military fiat of the decisive victory of Chief Moshood Kashima Olawale Abiola of the defunct Social Democratic Party in the June 12, 1993 presidential election. Up to that time, that's what he said, up to that time, the freest and fairest election in the country's political evolution. Now, that phrase, up to that time, for me, it means that there's been another election that we agree is better than that. Do you think that there's been another election since 1993 that we have reached a consensus that it was conducted better, was freer and fairer than the 1993 elections?
Well, for me, the 1993 elections was very, very fair because probably the system that was employed at the option A4.
You're sure you're not looking at it through your idealistic,
youthful lens? Because I participated in it and I saw, you see, the option A4, you cannot, it's very difficult for you to manipulate.
True, it was. Very all Nigerians agree on that.
Yes.
The question is, has there been another one since 1999 that we've conducted that we can say, yeah, we've made progress in terms of the conduct of our elections.
Not really.
And this one is better than what we had in 1993.
Not really. Because if we had probably the February 25th one will have been better. If we have said, okay, we are going now with the death aid of the computer and the rest of them people voted and the results are being posted real time and the result came out, maybe it could have been better. But I think they bundled it on the presidential election. But remember, there were 3 elections that took place on that day. The Federal House of Reps, the Senate. It's only the presidential election that had glitches. The all other ones were posted at real time. And that was where they missed it. If they've allowed it, probably it could have at least scientifically uplifted what we have saw in the 8-4.
Do you understand his point, though?
Well, I do understand his point. I do understand the fact that, like the president, well, he just quoted what he was reporting in the papers that they are so losers. So I don't want to get really into that. But what I would say that after June 12, 1993 election, which was conducted by the military incidentally, one would say, well, the election also conducted in 1999 that produced Obasanjo. You will say that. But you see, each time you saddle civilians with the responsibility of conducting election, because in the past we've not had this long period of uninterrupted democracy. More often than not, the military that will conduct the election normally, because in a way, their own partisanship is not apparent, unlike when civilians are conducting the election. For example, the 2003 election, which the losers at the time actually alleged incidentally it was conducted on April 19, and April 19 turned out to be 419 election. People derisively call that election that. So every election cycle conducted by civilians in the last 24 years will be challenged. People would say that it has not, especially those who have lost. But if you look at it, like no election, we always say, is perfect. But we say that the February 25th election approximates the will of the Nigerian people. Approximate. It's a reflection. Of course, it's work in progress. Even the Americans who have been at it 200 years plus, they still have occasional glitches. But what we're saying is that if you look at it, you say that it approximates, it reflects the wishes of the Nigerian people. This is what I would say.
That phrase being used, like saying, they are sore losers,
Okay,
or probably when you lose.
Just pardon us, because
okay.
we're about to go to Chief Okpadokun.
I don't think give us a little bit of history.
Chief
because
Okpadokun.
those of us who are celebrated today, like the present president,
okay,
was almost a sore loser because they traveled out of the country.
Okay.
They didn't even worse than what we are doing right now.
We do have Chief Ayo Okpadokun of NADECO. He joins us virtually. Good evening, Chief, and thank you for joining us on the program today. We're just talking about reflecting what transpired in 1993 and then our experiences with what we're facing today. How can we all get this a lot better? I mean, you've seen it all. And just give us your impressions of the essence of Democracy Day, which we're celebrating today.
Unfortunately, I'm not really at home with you. There's too much revisionism that is going on. Revisionism. Most of the people, characters we never knew. When the campaign for restoration of democracy was going on, are claiming what they are not. And they are the ones now dictating the tunes, making fantastic bogus statements. So I don't really want to be involved in all this diatribe. So that's my take.
Well, Chief, you know, we're just trying to see how we can, I mean, they always say that, look, you can't go forward without knowing where you're coming from so that you at least get it right moving forward. And that's part of the reasons why we're looking into all of this to ensure that, I mean, tomorrow there has to be a country. We all still have to forge together no matter what transpired because we're still here after 1993. So that's why we ask you. So perhaps if you could just tell us, because I also did ask the panel here that we've had several electoral reforms ever since 1993. But we still have one challenge or the other. What, in your estimation, would you recommend and how we should approach our elections moving forward such that the spirit that we had in 1993 could resonate amongst Nigerians who vote?
The fundamental error in your position is that you are assuming that certain things were done right, so we should take them for granted, and then we start building upon nothing. You don't build something on nothing. Those who have ideas, who were there at the beginning, you have neglected them. For example, there is no basis for all that you are talking about now because you don't know even how did we arrive about June 12 itself or 1993. Something led to it. So for people like me, honestly, I don't want to engage in diatribes that are not profitable. That's the truth of the matter. So you people can go on and do your talking. Told me 6 o'clock. This is to
Well, Chief Okpadokun, if you can hear me, it's so kind of you to join us this evening. I would really like to know, because you've talked about, you know, bogus people making bogus claims, people who were not exactly a part of the struggle for June 12. It was same trying to claim credit where they deserve none. In your mind and to your mind, who are those you think should be honored and celebrated today? Do you want to mention names? Oh dear, looks like Chief can't hear us for now. We'll work on that connection and get back to him. But since, I mean, one of the things that Chief has complained about is revisionism. He says there's plenty of it, you know, bogus people making bogus claims. And some people will say this boils down to the fact that, you know, for a while, history was taken out of our curriculum. Even at some points, we couldn't even agree on what history we wanted to teach. But history is back now. So the question is, what exactly are we teaching? Are we teaching history revised? or with the plethora of everybody say your truth, is truth being distorted as a result of that? What are your thoughts on it?
When, you see, people say history is a subjective account of the past, depending on who is telling the story. One African proverb says that until the lion learns to write, every story will glorify the hunter. So what I'm trying to say is, yes, I think we're not rendering past events in a more dispassionate manner. Everybody tend to report history on the basis of their own understanding, which could be flawed more often than not. Now, and it's important that if you want to know, unless you know where you're coming from, you probably will not know where you are headed to. And I think it's important, again, for the national, if there's anything like a national curricula, we are all agreed. Some people say Nigeria is actually a nation work in progress. There were several countries put together. We're trying to blend into a nation. I would say yes, perhaps in a way, yes. And I think recently, the February 25th election, if we continue on that pattern, when we disregard the usual underlying forces, divisions that tend to bring the worst among us. And I think it boils down to leadership. If we have a leadership that will recognize individual, value, quality, perhaps we can go past these things that divide us and then also distort history. Because like I said, June 12, unless you are a participant or you've been there actively, depending on who is telling the story. But one thing that is agreed, yes, it was one of the freest elections conducted that saw Abiola almost coasting to victory. Well, posthumously, he actually won the election, and which is understandable. We outlined some of the reasons why he won that election. So unless we go back, teach history the way it should be taught. For example, I have known growing up, some of us were compelled to understand European history, much more to the detriment of African history back in the day. Now you go back something as recently as 1980, for example. I know people when the mutant Boko Haram actually happened in Kano in 1980, when we had the Metazine. Most young people in their 30s, in their 40s, are unaware of the story of the Metazine, which was the mutant version of Boko Haram. And it actually started in Kano in 1980. So it's key, it's very important we revise our curricula, teach history the way it should be taught, the way, and then rising above the fray in rendering that, that event of the past. It's important.
Mr. Sanko, again, yes, I hear Mr. Ali, his perspective on this matter, but just talking about the process, at that time and now, because people have their own versions of what transpired at that time, and you can't begrudge anyone for that. But then the thing is, the process is the all-important process. Yes. It's because no matter what transpired at that time, everybody saw the camaraderie. They saw how they were eager to participate. They saw how when they went out there to vote, you could stand behind. So that process, I think, is central to a lot of things.
Very, very important.
With the way everything turns out. To the extent that even the results at that time, to a large extent, wouldn't even matter insofar as they saw the process. So how far away are we now, then and now?
Well, it's a very, very, in fact, it's like a hand of Barbariga, they are far apart. So this particular phase, when they say that, no, there's no perfect elections and all of those ones, it's a phrase used by those who want to feel that, okay, we've already gotten it anyway, so there's no perfect election. It's a wrong statement. If there's a particular threshold that you cannot, you have to surpass it to give a credence to an election. It's not like you having an exams. The moment you did not pass like 40, they will give you, of course, a P and a C and a B and an A. The moment you get a B, you can easily forgo of anything and say, look, this election was credible. But here we had an election that was not even surpassing the P level. Yes, because the process that you mentioned were being faulted. A lot of the process were supposed to have been followed 1, 2, 3, 4. And that, of course, comes in with the statements being made by the electoral umpire. For me, ab initio, there has been a fundamental issue. The fundamental issue actually started from the issue of Uwe's Justice Uwe's report. How I wish we implement it, it could have been better. Because we have an independent electoral commission that is heavily heavily tilted to a particular way. Whether we like it or not, I might be the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, going by that particular position that we have in our electoral laws and selecting the INEC chairman. It is faulty. Very, very faulty. We almost have a mouthpiece of the present president being a commissioner in INEC. If not for the huge crowd by the Nigerian people, it ought not to be. That's process one. Process two will have been that, okay, how do you intend to carry out the election? At what cost? And are you sure that the people's vote will be counted? And then they can own up to it? That's another position. How do we go about going into it in case there are disputes? Believe me, Chamberlain, if we had credible elections, many of our lawyers would have been out of business. Because election would have been finished at the polling unit, and then me and him would have congratulated each other, just like I just mentioned a football match. We pumped each other and said, man, you tried, you did very well. But it's not so today. There's a bitter war being fought at the electoral panel.
Well, this is not the first elections being conducted since 1993. There have been several others.
True.
And the question when I asked you earlier as to whether or not there are any that we can say time around, and it would seem that we all can agree that the results, were a true reflection of what transpired on election day. Are you saying that there's been none since 1999?
No, compared to what had happened in 1993, you are asking me a question whether there was anyone close to that. No, for me, no. Honestly,
well, what do you think is responsible for that?
No, it's just the execution of the agreed process.
Not even 2015 elections.
I don't. At that point in time, there were heavy use of funding and manipulation, also stealing of ballot boxes. We saw them here. We are seeing intimidation.
In 2015 elections?
There were stealing boxes.
With the introduction of the card reader?
The card reader was an introduction to just smoothing up the process. But there were both boxes. Even now, didn't you see ballot boxes being snatched? Even at the 2023, there are ballot boxes being destroyed right in front of us. You saw somebody carrying a ballot box and running.
So when I asked that question, I said, are you sure that you're not also using the, the eyes of youth? Because sometimes, youth tends to see things in a very ideal manner. And as you rightly pointed out, in that era, there was no social media. It is what transpired in your area that you would report. That's what you'll remember. That's what will be etched in your memory. I'm sure that there must have been reports of where things did not go as perfect as you would like to remember in 1993. That didn't invalidate the general nature of the total acceptability of the elections.
Because at that particular point in time, the process was almost seemingly to be accepted by everybody. In this case, it's different. You also don't forget that it was here some of us have been agitating that our youth have been docile, they are not being involved into politics. We were crying that they were not involved. People should encourage them to be part of the politics. Now they decided to be part of it. So looking at it even from their eye will have been an added plus to our democracy, seeing that we are grooming those younger ones that will take over from our leadership from tomorrow. And they're saying it has to start from now. So we need to start looking at it from the perspective of the Nigerian youth, how they feel. They feel very, very bad about the process at this particular point in time. So if there is a way in which we can appeal to their minds, making sure that probably the judiciary will have another point of view of trying to correct some of these wrongs so that they can have a little bit of trust into the process. As it is today, they are looking at it that anybody can just come in, whether you are qualified or not qualified, it doesn't matter. As long as you have your money, you can become anything.
We'll also have more elections coming through. We'll have Bayelsa, we'll have Kogi, we'll have some elections coming through. And for every election, we always want to do better than we've done before. I mean, INEC will always have that meetings and come up with several measures to see how we can improve. What, in your estimation, do you think we need to do to ensure that elections are better moving forward?
Well, I think most times we miss the point. Sometimes we focus on the process, which is important, it's crucial. But then those who involved in the process, what about them? Politicians, the electoral empire, the people involved. Unless we have this shift in our attitude, we're still going to have a situation where the process, we go through the process, we go through the motion, but the attitude of politicians, both sides, winners and losers. Sometimes, unless we learn to see it, as not a do-or-die affair, but someday you win some, you lose some. And that's why we are celebrating today. Those who were actively involved in 1993 election, and those who ran to fight for democracy, they are back. Either they are direct beneficiary of their struggle 30 years ago, or they are on the other side of the divide. So unless politicians, beginning with them, one thing, if we recall very well, in the months leading to the 1993 election, there was a massive public enlightenment to option A4, which, after experimenting with others, finally settled on option A4. I remember the commendable conduct of what was then the mutant and the early version of National Orientation Agency, that is the MAMSA, a lot of public enlightenment. But you see what we have now. Rather than build on that, what normally we do, sometimes you wonder where the National Orientation Agency is. We allow charlatans, people who would mount operating from sometimes even the pulpit, churning out influences, especially for the uninitiated, people who are mindless of history, and then shaping their thought process. And then, like I said from the onset, with the social media in the mix now, young people, I've always said they are the agents of change. Young people largely participated in the election of February 25th and others before then. Now, unless we begin to have this attitudinal change, we have a country to run. We have no other country. Unless we have that, then we begin to build, if you like, new citizens, new Nigerians, who, because it's a process now, those who came, into existence in 1999, they're 25-year-old now. When people make this reference, that in 1979, the likes of Osibanjo, El-Rufai, they were in their they were actually teenagers. El-Rufai in 1979 was a teenager. The current vice president in 1979, he was 13 years old. But now, when they say youth are the leaders tomorrow, how are we preparing the new Nigerians? Now, look at it. Look at our national environment now. Educationally, for example, I always say my generation, we are a product of integration. What I mean by that, we went to unity colleges, we served across the Niger, we work all over the nation. I'm from Kano, but I've lived and worked in Lagos for years. Now, I've made friends. I attended a unity college. I attended a Catholic school, for example. I lost all of my generation, unless we begin to build new Nigerians who would see Nigeria as Nigeria. But the way we are now, if you look at the role of the pulpit in the last election, and even before then, what role, unless we begin to apply brakes, think Nigeria, maybe we'll continue to miss it. Now, in the impending election, when you have a former president saying, equating election as a do or die, that is the #1 citizen of the nation at a point that is either you win or you die in the process. That's the import of what he's saying. Unless we take away this desperation, you can serve, not necessarily, there are so many people who are influential without having to be in the executive mansion. So unless we all collectively have a rebirth, conscious, national rebirth, when we think Nigeria, and all these factors that are listed in shaping public opinion, building new Nigeria. Look at, people now want to serve in their backyard. Back in the day, you want to go away from your region. You have new experience, fresh adventure, you understand? But now people, imagine you're born in Kano, you want to serve in Katsina State. When you are sent to Akwa Ibom, you want to run back home. You are born in Akwa Ibom, I'm just giving you an example.
Yeah, I get you. So
the process, I guess, if we go through.
As we wind down, Mr. Tanko, when he speaks about spirit of new Nigeria, getting things right, that we talk about the process, sometimes we may be oblivious or perhaps erroneously miss out on the players themselves and the role they play. And I just wonder, I remember in 2003, that presidential election at the time, late Ganefawami contested that election on NCP, and you were in NCP at the time. Of course. And I think he got about 161,333 votes, and many thought, what's it, Benny? Wasn't he the typology of the kind of people that we wanted to be in office at the time? Exactly. But at that time, he still didn't get the vote. He didn't go beyond that. So what is it that we missed ever since that 93 and then moving forward? Okay. That we need to get back.
Probably is trying to take a cue from the manifesto of Peter Obi that a new Nigeria is possible. You know, that's what he's thinking about, getting a new Nigeria at that time. Well, I agree. We need a new Nigeria. and then we need to like take back into some of our history and some of the things that we've done wrong. The catch here is that the present leaders, are they really interested in building a country for the future? If they are, then some of the mistakes are very, very easily we can surmount them. But we ignore them. Rather, what they do is that they pile up more of those particular mistakes that's already been done over the years, as if there are no researchers.
So what do you want to see?
What I want to see is that a country that surpasses Europe, or that is in the process of surpassing...
In terms of, if there were to be reforms
laws and order,
in our electoral laws.
Yes, it's law and order. Once the laws say A, follow A. If you say B, follow B. It will give us a direction. But where the laws are being positioned, and then there are manipulation of the laws, then what you are seeing is a retrogressive process. So democracy itself is about the rule of law and order. Today, you saw what is happening to former president of the United States of America, because they are trying to follow rules and laws. And if we do that to ourselves, we could have a similar view of saying that maybe our democracy will be moving. 12.5 million Nigerian youth, if I'm not quoting wrong figures, register to vote. That's to you the heavy import of the interest of this youth. And what are we sending to them? We are saying that they can just position anything that the rules and regulations says, and then you can do anything. So at the end of it all, you will not have a right to catch somebody who has stolen a chicken in the public market, because you have already kept its laws, its abeyance. But what we need to do is enforce the law, make sure it works, and then you execute it in such a way that everybody will feel comfortable about it. And I can show you, our democracy will move in much better. But once you put it aside, believe me, we have a big problem.
All right, gentlemen, we have to thank you both for coming on. Dr. Yunus Atanko, Chief Spokesperson, Labour Party Presidential Campaign Council, as well as Ali, member, Presidential Transition Committee of the APC. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on, and all the best to both of you.
Thank you very much for having us.
2023.
And God bless Nigeria.
Thank you. 2023 Democracy Day will continue in a moment. Stay on with us.
Nigeria must heal. Nigeria must heal. But we also must have the courage to identify the scars, the wounds, the injuries. The worst thing that can happen to us is to pretend that everything is okay, because everything is not okay. We have so many of our citizens who have lost their lives. We have so many of our citizens who are still in captivity. Managing diversity and managing differences is not about religious leaders talking together. It is about whether the state can create the kind of infrastructure, the guardrails, that can help Nigerians move as citizens of their country. But right now, there is how people feel because they are Christians or Muslims. There is how people feel because they are women. The levels and categories of exclusion are so tremendous and so immense. So I hope that going forward, the things that the guest speaker has spoken about most eloquently, that is, how do you manage victory? How do you manage victory? How do you mutate from being a politician who was contesting election to being a politician who has won elections? Very often, and what is clear to us in Africa, why religion, why ethnicity, why all these things continue to injure our countries, is largely because we have not come to terms with the fact that power is just about, as somebody said, our turn to eat. We cannot grow a country like this. We will remain volatile. And as you see on a racetrack, everybody stands or kneels differently. There is no advantage. The location may be different. But when the gun is fired, the man who is right closer to the inner part of the ring is a little bit away. We don't expect that all of us will finish, but let us create an environment in which all of us can compete. And we will win according to our energy and our speed. African politics must remain and will remain violent unless and until we find an equilibrium in which, one, we are citizens of a country. So, Mr. Vice President-elect, the challenge for you is to make this country believable, livable, credible, so that all of us together can stand in one tent and build a great nation.
It is only natural that even as those who won and experienced victory in various elections are elated and fulfilled, those who lost are disenchanted and disappointed. But the beauty of democracy is that those who win today can lose tomorrow, and those who lose today will have an opportunity to compete and win in the next rounds of elections. Those who cannot endure and accept the pains of defeat in elections do not deserve the joy of victory when it is their turn to triumph. Above all, those who disagree with the outcome of the elections are taking full advantage of the constitutional provisions to seek redress in court. That is one of the reasons why democracy is the best form of government invented by man.
Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back from our Abuja studios, where we had the first in our series of discussions on this Democracy Day 2023. Of course, you expect disagreements, you expect different feedback, you expect different opinions in that segment. And by the way, I feel I should let Mark and Chamberlain know. I took that test about those people. Yes. And one of the first things is that they are not all heroes past. Yes. Some of them are still heroes present. Indeed. Okay. The second is that actually I think I got all of them correctly. Okay. Yeah, because I think I know all of them personally, actually.
But don't let the cat out of the bag.
No.
It's still
you see, I haven't mentioned any names.
It's still a competition, and we know that a number of you are already have sent in your answers. We also know that, just to remind you that this program is streaming on our Facebook page, also our Twitter handle @ChannelsTV, and our Facebook. At the beginning, I thought that I knew about 6. 6, yes, I can safely say that 6. So,
6, okay.
Yes, I'm coming up. And
maybe in the course of the program, you'll remember a couple more.
Maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed. Another reminder as well, yes, so that's the email for you to send all of your answers to. The hashtag also is on Twitter. It is live, 2023 Democracy Day. We'd like to thank you for joining us from wherever you are. We're moving into another segment. In the meantime, the segment in Abuja was quite insightful.
Yeah, quite interesting. That was what I was talking about, differences in opinion. I mean, it's what people describe as the fractured nature of the nation's political terrain at the moment. So, I mean, it's logical that coming from there, you would then want to discuss what needs to be done to reduce those fractures, to reduce the features, if you like, within the polity that have been caused by recent and sometimes not so recent events. So, in that respect, before we get into the discussion, let's go to our correspondent, Jeffrey Uzono, who has a bit of a background on this issue. So, Jeffrey.
Thanks for staying with us on this special Democracy Day broadcast where we celebrate democracy. Ladi and Millicent, well, it's no news that Nigeria is highly divided along ethnic and religious lines. But we need to move on as a country and reconcile, look for a way to heal, which is going to be the conversation you're going to have next with our guest right there in the studio. But some have said this issue predates most of us. They say it goes way back even to the amalgamation of Nigeria in 1914. They say we're formed into a homogenic template without respect for a disparate cluster. And what did that do? It sent us into a perpetual state of mutual suspicion and paranoia, and these ethnic lines and religious lines are being stoked, and they are called fault lines. They are stoked at each election cycle, like we saw in the very last election in 2023 this year. And of course, some have also argued that conflict is a necessary incident of any human existence. At the end of the day, we can't sit right there in conflict and allow our country to burn. We need to look for a way to reconcile in the face of justice and equity and move on as a people, one way or the other, which is why we're having this conversation. So my responsibility is to walk you through some part of history at different points in our history where we're challenged, but our resilience, our sense of reconciliation, survival, and triumph came through. The 1967 Civil War that transcended 67 to 70, a protracted political, ethnic, and economic, even religious tension, it left many people dead. And it was quite a bloody situation across the country where people died and left us with a divided country. But what did the head of state do then? He made a statement, no victor, no vanquish, declaring that, look, it's about all of us. Nobody won, nobody lost. We are in this together. That's a soothing statement from an elder statesman to ensure that a country is healed and we reconcile. It didn't end there. It took another action. The NYSC scheme, Decree 24, 1973, in a bid to reconstruct, reconcile, and even rebuild the country. So you can see, disunity and being fragmented is not new to us as a people, but we've always looked for a way to move on. If we fast forward in our history, democracy was aborted in 1983. Democracy was aborted again in 1993. And this great man right here, Chief M.K. Abiola, his mandate was denied. This generated outrage. It looked like we were literally at the precipice. We're literally about to explode as a country. But given the Nigerian spirit, we kept pushing. He came back. He went on exile, came back, and was later jailed, and he died in custody. And Nigerians refused to give up on their country. We kept moving until in 1999, when the military transferred power back to the democratically elected President Olusegun Obasanjo, being handed over there by General Abdulsalami Abubakar at the Eagle Square on May 29. He knew that he had a broken country in his hand, traumatized citizens who have suffered in the hands of the military. What did he do? He set up the Oputa panel to investigate human rights violation and cases of abuse under the military, and even communities that were warring against themselves. Well, nothing may have come out so much of that panel, but at least people were heard. If we move on, we're going to see another point in our history, 2015. This was another point when Nigeria was literally threatened. Our republic was threatened that we would not survive this. But this statesman right here, then President Goodluck Jonathan, made this statement. He said, my ambition is not worth the blood of any Nigerian. What am I saying? At the end of the day, see that we try to make effort in the midst of our chaos, all the injustices we see, to see how we can move on as a country. And eminent distinguished statesmen, including General Abdulsalami Abubakar, see him right here in this picture between then President Goodluck Jonathan and General Muhammadu Buhari. They came together, they formed the National Peace Committee and made sure that they signed the peace accord. So we had the likes of Bishop Matthew Kuka, Sultan of Sokoto, and many others who ensured that, look, something is brewing in the air that could bring this country down, and all the candidates have to contest in this election and sign to the fact that, look, whatever comes out of this election, we will take it and allow the country move on and heal. And exactly, well, it happened. There was an upset for the very first time in our history. A sitting president lost election. And this phone call right here, this should literally be framed around everywhere, because this distinguished gentleman called the man who he lost to and congratulated him, conceding defeat, and told him, look, let's look for a way to plan the transition period. Congratulations, Your Excellency. This was a very, very important moment in our history. So what we're dealing with is not new in terms of our disunity and the things we're challenged with. If we move on now, we'll see that the immediate past president, Muhammadu Buhari, to bring closure to the June 12th, some level of closure to the June 12th incident in 1993, to recognize the fact that Chief M.K. Abiola got the highest number of votes and won that election. It conferred on him that highest national honor, as well as his comrades right there, and his son receiving the award on his behalf. But there's another thing he did that was very soothing, very calming to the polity. He said, on behalf of the federal government, I tender the nation's apology to the family of late M.K. Abiola and all other comrades who died in the struggle. Classic statement from the president to bring peace to the polity. And if we move on, well, 2023, just before this last election, we knew this election would be keenly contested, but what we didn't see coming was all the fireworks that were ensued, ethnically charged, deeply polarizing, religious lines. It was something as bigotry, voters. We saw all kinds of things, and now we have a situation in our hands. Well, the Peace Committee, having seen what was going on, came again and they should be commended. The Peace Committee, National Peace Committee, came again and ensured that these 18 candidates signed that peace accord to ensure that at the end of the exercise, everybody accepts what happened, and if you feel aggrieved, you seek redress constitutionally. Well, this was the election, and a president emerged. And to the credit of the opponents, the opposing party, opposition parties, they're in court now to challenge the mandate of the incumbent president, because the effort of everybody to ensure that we don't burn our country down even after we lose election was quite commendable from everybody, from the Peace Committee, from Nigerians as a people, from the candidate themselves. And if we move on now, we'll see that the president has made some promises, haven't realized what he inherited, because he knows he's inheriting a country that is deeply divided across party lines, across religious, across ethnic lines. He said we shall reach out to all, but never put down a single person for holding views contrary to our own. And we are here to further mend and heal this nation and not tear it down and injure it. The president has made his commitment, and it is now time for all of us to support the president as much as we can. Because some people have said that, look, there cannot be healing without justice. And we hope that all of the things that the president has said in terms of ensuring that he walks by the Constitution and the rule of law, he stands by it, because, Ladi Millicent, at the end of the day, we're all we have. We just have to look for a way to move on and ensure that justice is served for everyone to be happy for a better day as Nigeria continues to move on as a country. Ladi Millicent?
Well put, Jeffrey.
Very well put, Jeffrey. A very tough task, tall task, but the historical background gives the impression that several times we've been here before and we've somehow found a way, found ways to walk our way back from the precipice. Very, very important points, historical analysis there from Jeffrey.
Indeed.
So,
well, talking about national reconciliation, we have our panelists in Lagos, also in the nation's capital, Abuja, and from Borno State, Maiduguri, our studio. Let's begin with our guests here in Lagos. We would like to welcome Mr. Yomi Badejo Kusonya, lead partner, CMC Connect, former president, African Republic Relations Association. Thank you for joining us. Also, we have with him here in Lagos as well, Mr. Jake Ekpele, CEO, TAF Africa. Welcome.
Good evening, Nigerians.
And over in our Abuja studio is Mr. Atta Bakindo. He's the Executive Director, Kuka Center, Senior Fellow for International Religious Freedom in Conflict Regions. Thank you for joining us. Also, in the middle there, the lady, Ms. Idiat Hassan, Director, Center for Democracy and Development, and also we're joined by Professor Oke Ikechukwu, Strategic Management and Human Capital Development. A warm welcome to all of you there.
Indeed, also in our Maiduguri studios, we have Professor Khalifa Dikwa, Dean of the Borno Elders Forum, advocate of healing national reconciliation. Very strong voice there. Professor Dikwa, thank you for your time. Welcome to the program. Welcome to all of you. This is a topic that some would say very difficult to attend to, especially because there are more centrifugal forces now than it appeared that there had ever been in the nation's history before now. But again, there will be others who have said, look, we've traveled down this road so many times, and when the heat is taken out of the conversation, then you begin to see some level of a light. So let me begin from Idiat Hassan in our Abuja studio, the lady on the panel. Idiat, when last I spoke to you ahead of this election, you had mentioned that it would probably end up being like this. There'd be a lot of fracture, there'd be a lot of disappointment, especially on the part of those who felt they had been cheated. And then what would prove critical is what happened next between those who have been said to lose and those who have been said to win. So this doesn't come as a surprise. The question is, where do we go from here? What should happen now?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ladi. Thank you very much, Ladi. I think it's, as a country, we should actually celebrate that these elections did not end violence. as projected by many. There were beliefs that, oh, this will actually be the most violent elections that would ever have been conducted in the history of this country. And we did not encounter any form of post-election violence, irrespective of the fractured nature of the elections. Even all these gladiators headed to the court and not the street, which tells us that indeed democracy is actually maturing in this country, and there is something to celebrate. Now, when it comes to how do we deal with this, I think first and important is that the judicial process is ongoing, and this is a very important process. Elections, it's what we call the electoral justice, where we expect that justice will actually be seen to be done and by every body, and we continue to watch that process. But it's also important that the business of governance is already ongoing. And what Nigerians will actually be looking at immediately is the inclusive nature of the next administration. And this falls under the mantle of the current president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu. How inclusive will his administration be? Will it be that of just federal character, where we just bring people from each of the states? Or will it be one that will be inclusive of young people, persons living with disability, women, other vulnerable groups, that it brings joy and succor to the people? And it also rises above, like President Muhammadu Buhari did with the June 12 elections, to look at some of the salient challenges that is blighting this country, which actually includes the civil war, which occurred between 1967 to 1970. Yes, it was not the one who actually caused it, but an apology to see that justice is done, is seen to be done, might actually be a soothing nerve that can help calm tension in that part of the country, and one that calms tension across generations.
Let me ask Professor Ikechukwu there. What we have seen happen thus far is that all eyes have turned from the electoral process now to the judiciary. And everybody's talked about, look, justice must be done, justice must be seen to be done. But then the interpretation that everybody gives to justice also is now constituting a different kind of challenge. And that, some have said, is putting undue pressure on the judicial system and on the judicial officers. Some of those I've spoken to have pointed out that, look, the judicial officers are also Nigerians, and what you're asking them to do is to replace the Nigerian voter in deciding who won the election. Some of the things that have been said and done by many of the stakeholders puts unbridled pressure on them. So even though there's justice, there's the need for justice, what Idayat has called electoral justice, where do we draw the line between seeking justice and putting those who are supposed to dispense justice under undue pressure, so that at the end of the day, what they come out with is not necessarily justice?
Well, for me, the question of drawing a line doesn't actually arise because no line exists. The judiciary is a statutory arm of government that has a duty to perform. Now, aggrieved parties have a right to express opinions on what they expect from the judiciary. Now, if the opinion of aggrieved parties outside of the law and the judicial system is deemed to be pressure, I don't understand what kind of pressure that is. If, for instance, you're in the hospital for surgery, is appendectomy that's about to be carried out, and some of your relations are outside and they're complaining that, oh, this doctor should do this and the other one, it doesn't affect the diagnosis. So let's put a few facts straight on the table. Number one, if you go into a contest, it means you accept the rules of the contest. So if you go for an election, your expectation is that you'll either win or lose. Now, part of the tools, or what you find in the toolkit of the democratic enterprise, is the judicial process. So you go for elections, results are not satisfactory from your point of view, you move to the next level, which is statutory, which is mandatory, which is constitutional, that is the law. So you go there. You also don't tell the judiciary to finish it in 30 minutes. You look at the existing law. You have a law. You're supposed to go through this at the tribunal for 180 days. You have another 60 days at the Supreme Court, I think, if I have my facts right. So you can't jump forward and say, oh, you know, I've become impatient. Stop it. No. So what am I leading up to? There are opinions, there are concerns, there are even hysterical reactions to what is going on in the judiciary regarding the elections. It is the duty of the judiciary to conduct itself with dignity. The little I know of what should happen in a court is that the presiding justices will say, according to the evidence before me. Now, if somebody is shouting outside the hall, or people are wrestling at the stadium in Surulere, and from there they are making comments, should that distract somebody who has evidence before him? So I think also there has to be some greater discipline in the conversation regarding this matter, so that we don't begin to assume or pretend that what does not matter matters. Point. Every Nigerian has a point of view on the election. Point. Every Nigerian had to register to vote. Point. Every candidate knew he would either win or lose. Point. Every person in court today knows he will either win or lose. These are the facts on the table. Now, for judicial, of what kind of pressure? Are they threatened? If they are threatened physically, that's a matter forbidden by the law. But I think what they are talking about is that there's a lot of social pressure in the kind of opinions being expressed in the social media among those who feel strongly about the outcome for and against. All of that must go on. But the whole point of leadership at any level, whether legislative, judicial, or executive, is that you settle for facts. You settle for defensible and justifiable positions. If you want to, you say you're the judiciary and you're panicking and trembling because people are expressing opinions instead of facing your job, leave that job, go somewhere. I mean, okay, you don't want to make people unhappy. Why not go into entertainment? You can actually be a cartoonist, or maybe a basket mouth, I think that's, what do you call them now, who get up and crack jokes. But if you're serious as a legal officer, and I say legal officer who understands that that's the last port of call for the Nigerian citizen, that's the only arm of government that can query the integrity, authenticity, and ontological status of any law coming from the National Assembly or any action coming out from the executive, and you're telling me you're under pressure because people are expressing opinions, go and find another line of work. It's not for children. So I think the thing is for us to also speak a little more strongly about this so that we don't begin to persuade ourselves that this is actually to be taken seriously. All that is going on in this matter is within the chambers. Now, the chambers are not a Joelegba, so bosses won't run over you and all of that. Yes, the social pressure, the social media commentary, the frustration of those who believe they should have had a certain result, you see, all of that constitutes the discipline of national political development, in that aspects, after expressing that opinion, after all that excitement, you must sit down calmly and wait for the outcome and the decision of the judiciary. This is part of national development. But to say that the pressure is so much and so the judiciary is about to get distracted, I think we should dismiss that statement and discourage any judicial officer from embarrassing himself by saying such a thing in public, with all due respect.
Thank you, Prof. A different perspective there. But let's get your thoughts, Mr. Atabakindo. Do you agree? We've heard from Madam Hassan and her point of view on the issue in terms of the democracy when we're looking at the 2023 general elections. Has it divided us even more? Is it the reason why there is this unity? What's your take, Mr. Bakindo?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with the last two speakers. Nigeria is not only physically divided into states and local governments and tribes and traditional chiefdoms and all that, but I think what we could add is the fact that it's also an unequal society, despite the fact that, you know, the spirit of democracy has thrived and a lot of progress as well has been made, especially some of the ingredients that can deepen democracy, as the Prof has said, in terms of having dignified legal, you know, actors and agents that can help deepen democracy. You look at the media, social media, access to independent, you know, outlets of news that people have access to information across the country. all that has improved in the spirit of democracy. But the country remains not only divided, but also a bit unequal. You look at access to education between North and South. You look at access to health care. If you look at access to privileges and even, access to power, or those in power, so to say. So I think that the country quite remains a bit divided, a bit unequal. And as we are going through with the judicial process, it's important that those who are now governing and who have that, are privileged to govern us, to come together to see how they can actually, unite this country, particularly in terms of healing and reconciliation. First of all, it's difficult to reconcile individuals and communities if people, first of all, are not healed. The elections were conducted in a context that was not only divided, but all kinds of conflicts, violent conflicts, were ongoing. Either insurgency in the north, militancy, kidnapping, banditry. And people were already suffering, going through lots of traumas, either in IDP camps or others. So I think that individual and healing of communities must happen, even before you talk of reconciliation, between people. So we appeal to those who are now, handling the affairs of the country to please come together to see how they can provide the platforms and the opportunities for people to heal, but at the same time reconcile, so that the country, can move forward. But we must accept that some appreciable progress has also been made, but we remain divided and very unequal.
Let's come to the Lagos studios here. Mr. Yomi Badijo-Kusa and Mr. Pele, let me start with you. Some of those that one has mentioned have said, look, this is really public relations. When you talk about national reconciliation and healing, it's good public relations. It's also about perception management. I don't want to sound simplistic, but is that what it really is?
Well, I would say so. I would agree. And to buttress that point, only last year, sometime mid-last year, the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations had a summit. We put together a summit where we went to the various zones of the Federation, the geographical zones, and then we ended up in Abuja. And, coincidentally, 3 of your panelists were members of that national reconciliation, which we titled Rebooting Nigeria, and talking about how we could reorientate and we could revalue Nigeria, so to speak. Dr. Pele was there, and OK from Abuja was also there, and of course I'm there. The report is almost ready. It will be published perhaps in the next 1 month or so. And we had done this because we had seen the challenges that the nation had at that time leading up to the elections. Just like everybody said, we thought that, can we get past these elections? And we felt that we needed to do something about it. We needed to do something about the issue of tribalism. We needed to do something about ethnicity. Definitely, we needed to do something about religion. And let me put it like this. There are 2 things that are summary of how we can repair this country. It has to do with trust and values. The trust has completely broken down, which is why the Nigeria police will say the police is your friend, and you don't believe. It's just, truthfully, there's nowhere else for us to go, which is why the government will make a statement about something that we don't believe. I mean,
the trust in government institutions.
Look, not even trust in government, trust amongst the various stakeholders. So Muslims don't trust Christians, Christians don't trust Muslims, Catholics don't trust Pentecostals, and Pentecostals don't trust Methodists. It just goes down the line. And so that trust has broken down severely. We don't trust one another. We don't trust government. So when government makes a statement in the morning, you check if it's true.
Especially on social media.
Yeah, even without social media, I'm sure the president made a statement this morning and a lot of people were probably sniggering. So we don't trust government, we don't trust ourselves. And then the second thing is that our values have gone to the dogs. If you, there's a story which is making the round, and I believe it's true. We lost one of our titans in the banking industry, Shubomi Balogun, Otumba Shubomi Balogun, recently. I don't know if you've read the story, which says that when Dr. Alex Ekweme had to go to the East because of the Civil War, he left his property in his care. And when he came back, he was given every penny in terms of rent. My mom used to tell me that in those days, people who had to go back to the East because of the war, they left things like their bicycles. And if you're caught riding the bicycle, they made a public ridicule of you, saying that, you know, how can you ride the bicycle of Baba Chukura and so on and so forth. So those values have been completely eroded. Look, the people who are struggling for leadership in this country, everyone has one case or the other hanging on their necks. To the extent that somebody who was running for the leadership of one of the houses of National Assembly was facing a murder charge. And he actually went on television to say that it didn't matter that he was facing a murder charge. He had nothing to do with his speakership or running for office as a speaker. For me, if we're going to repair this country,
that's true.
These two, the president really needs to rebuild the trust. Some of the moves he's done or he's taking, some of the decisions he's taking, is going in that direction. But he needs to be much more purposeful in rebuilding that trust because without trust, nothing can be done. The only reason a man is married to a woman is trust. The only reason, Millicent and Ladi, you are here at Channels is because you trust the system. The minute you begin to doubt the system, you're either not putting in your best or you even throw in the towel as a whole. And then we've got to revisit the values that bind us together. I think I'll stop there.
Dr. Pele.
Dr. Pele, I mean, taking it from there, trust and values, he's mentioned that. I mean, trust is a value, some would say. I mean, if you look at it elementarily. But if you take a look at the historical background that Jeff gave us, we have had this all along. It didn't start with this last election. But perhaps this last election was the proverbial camel or straw that broke the camel's back, depending on how you look at it. What do you make of it?
Well, it's interesting. I think when we talk about unity and trust and all that, we need to take a step back and ask ourselves, what are the factors that are responsible for where we are? Why did we get to where we are? I call that, to me, they are retroactive steps that we have taken. And the second aspect that I'll look at is what are the proactive steps that we can take. There is no doubt, and Ladi, you know, I sat here and I'm like, okay, what would I say would lead us to more disunity tomorrow? The steps that they take at the National Assembly, whoever emerges, if it's not the people's will, it will further divide us and create more polarization. The second is the appointment by the president. If the president do not give ears and his mind to inclusive governance, to shrinking the government, this government is too big and is swallowing us. It's like a big elephant that places his foot on our truth. And we need to take those proactive steps. What are those reactive measures that we've taken? Ethnicity, religious issues, the poverty that have not been addressed. You stand by the roadside and a politician who stole your money will drive past you and spill you with waters that is by the roadside. When are we going to sit back and take responsibility for our actions and find a proactive measure that will repair the mindset of Nigerians, the inequalities that is staring on our faces? You know, when are we going to address the issues that are lingering around religion, where people are using religion as a bait, where people think, take for instance, and I'll say this, I'm sure, Mr. President, you're looking at us, you're listening to us tonight. You have a Muslim ticket. These are elephant in the room. Many people will not discuss it. I'm going to discuss it. You have a Muslim ticket. You cannot sit there and watch them have another Muslim ticket or House members. You are going to further divide this country, period. I've always proposed that since we have a Muslim in the executive arm, why can't you push for us to have a Christian in the legislative arm? Somebody will look at me and say, well, it's not about religion. Religion plays a very important part in the unity of this country. Take it or leave it. And it must not be ignored. The poverty level, it is alarming. And you cannot be there, up there, and enjoying all the perks of life, and you expect the poor people who are looking for crumbs to be at peace with you. You cannot get peace when you create chaos. You cannot get peace when you don't look at issues around inclusivity. For too long, there have been non-participation of persons with disability in the cabinet. This is the right time, and if this president wants to make a mark, this is the right time to give the community of persons with disability at least one minister. I don't care whether it's Minister of State or the main minister. We need to sit at the Federal Executive Council and make decisions for the betterment of this country, period. The governors, you have a responsibility to appoint commissioners. We're tired of being called SAs. You know, give us just a little. The same tokenism that we're fighting is manifesting, and it should not be there. You cannot get true unity if you don't appease the marginalized. Indeed. Because they are the one that they use to fuel trouble. Indeed. If they are at peace with everybody, then we will have peace.
Let's find out from Professor Dikwa, who's with us in our Abuja studio. Prof, you've heard from our guests in Abuja and also in Lagos. What to you would you say would bring together Nigerians? Is it the shortfall of trust, the shortfall of values? What to you do you see unifying Nigeria? Professor Dikwa. All right, perhaps we'll come back to Professor Dikwa. But when you mentioned trust, the problem of trust values, my question was, who's to blame? How did we get here? Is it the leadership? Is it the people? Is it the socioeconomic problems which we've had over the years?
Very good question. And I'm going to quote from the Bible because that's what I know. The Bible says that if the foundation be destroyed, what can the righteous do? Our foundation was shaky from the beginning, and I think we had that in our introduction. We've been trying, you know, it's like you've taken the chemist, I think, or the physicist would tell you that when you take glass, you take iron, you take wood, and you want to weld them together, there's a process. So you've got to reduce one state into another. So maybe reduce metal into liquid and so on and so forth. So we haven't done that. We haven't done that. And this trust has been trampled on for a long time. It is the big. It is June 12. It is 12 2/3 of 19 is 12. If you remember in 1979, that is it. It is all the kind of things that we've done all over. It is so these things have come to now bite us because trust in itself is a fuel. And that's what keeps other nations going. So let's talk about how did June 12, the agitation for June 12 last so much? Because the people who are at the forefront of it, they had fuel to run. They had the likes of Radio Kudurat. They had, all kinds of things to fuel it. But the minute they run out of the fuel, then the vehicle stops. So we've been running on this trust for a while. So at a point in time when somebody tells you that you are going to jail, it was a big deal in Lagos that I know my parents, so because my mom will say something like, oh, that person, I don't mind that person, he's gone to prison before. And that completely disqualified you. I know somebody who was suspended from office, suspended, and at the end of the day, he was exonerated. His life was never the same again. You know why? He became a recluse because he couldn't understand how he could face the society. The very thought that he was suspended from office meant that there was something wrong. But what do we have today? People blatantly steal things. People make statements that are divisive. Is that the word? Divisive, yeah. And you find some organizations even coming to back them up and saying what this person said makes sense. So what are we doing? We gradually ripped the trust quotient. We ripped it so we don't believe. Okay, we believe channels sometimes.
All the time.
I'm just saying. Have you done this? And I'm sure that many of us, you read a piece of news, and then if you're somebody who watches our said, you turn to the next person. It actually happened to me 2-3 days ago when I heard that Emefiele had been suspended. It came on some news channel, and then I turned to the other person and said, have you read this? Is it true? Do you know where I read it from? Channels TV. You understand me? Not because Channel doesn't tell the truth, but because we know people can go to the extent that they can fake Channel logo for a purpose.
That has happened several times.
Please, I know Channel tells the truth every time. So what I'm saying here is that unless we rebuild the trust, and that trust rebuilding will start from values. And part of the value is what you're talking about, sir, inclusiveness. We can't get further.
As interesting as this is, I want to take a break. We're going to take a short break. Okay. When we come back, we'll continue this discussion. I will bring back our guests in the Abuja studio, so please stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back to the program, Democracy Day 2023. And before we took what turned out to be a fairly long commercial break, Dr. Perry, you were trying to make a point. I'm going to give you just 1 minute to make that point before I go back to the Abuja studios and ask the question about statesmen and how that should be driving this process. I will get to that, but I'll give you the minute.
Yeah, I think a lot has been said about trust. That is true, trust and values. But we need to also understand and underscore what was responsible for the distrust. Take, for instance, an institution that I so loved, INEC, spoke stoutly, defended them, raised the trust consciousness of the electorate, promised heaven and earth and instantly underperformed. And you saw trust eroded very fast. For one reason, because they have not come to realize the power of effective and honest communication. You were having problems with the IRF. Why didn't you tell us? That's all. And they decided to keep it, and that's where, and have put this whole election into jeopardy. So when people need to understand, and all of us here, that trust is earned, is not given.
To repair that trust, would an apology suffice?
Well, somehow, if you still tell us the reason, apologies are good, but apologies are not good enough when you don't give us the reason why you are apologizing, you know? And so trust can be rebuilt when honesty, integrity, and trustworthiness is presented before the people that you have violated their trust. It's like a woman. When you meet a woman and probably you did something that she didn't like, and you come honestly with good intention and render unreserved apologies, you guys have a heart of gold. You easily forgive and move on. Trust can be earned when trusted people present the facts in clear terms.
Let's go back to Abuja and ask our guests there, Idad Hassan, Reverend Father Atabakindo, and Professor Okechukwu. In no particular order, I'll ask the three of you to look at this point. The question has been asked that, look, when you talk about national reconciliation and national unity and growing the process, the people who should actually be doing this at various levels are those we refer to as statesmen, those who are far removed from the hurly-burly of the partisanship, those who can look at things and think in terms of the long term. But most importantly, as some of our guests have said, those who can rebuild the trust quotient because they themselves are trusted. Do we have those people? Are they missing? And if so, why are they not driving the process now? Because we are now looking at going forward. Even as the judicial process continues in terms of the electoral process, the nation has to move forward because whatever the judiciary comes out with, we're still going to need national reconciliation. We're still going to need national unity.
Okay. Oh,
want to go first?
Okay. I think that those processes are ongoing. For example, the National Peace Committee, conversations are happening. They may not be practically publicly done. And I think in rebuilding the trust to ensure healing for the nation to move forward, this can be done probably at individual level, ensuring that lessons are taught in schools and all that. But I think for me, two things must be done, and they must be done really very quickly. Number one, it is very important that those who are in charge of the affairs of this country really live up to their promises. If they want to earn the trust of people and they want to really, win back the trust from people. So their political promises, campaign promises, looking at the level of poverty that Jake mentioned, people are really dispossessed. People are angry. And not only that, because over time, there are accumulated grievances that have not been addressed. And people are still expecting that these things should be addressed. So if you want to win back the trust of the people, that has to be done. And it could be done by those key stakeholders that have the convening power, but also including the government. The second thing that should be done very quickly is that the government must support in ending the culture of impunity. I know it's very difficult if you are a leader and you emerge through a process that is compromised. And you have a moral burden in ensuring that the law is obeyed. But the level of impunity in this country is staggering. It's even shocking. And I'll give a very simple example. In 2012, I visited Singapore. And the house I was living, just outside the house, 2 cars had an accident. And the police came and investigated. and discovered that the government was supposed to mount, a traffic light in that particular spot. That was not done. So the policemen took the government to court to compensate the two drivers. But if you bring it back to Nigeria, I was in front of the Hilton, and the traffic light stopped me, red, and I stopped. And a rickety taxi came and hit my car. And the security personnel that were there approached me and said, Oga, you look well fed. Forgive this poor man. Forgive this poor man, because where will he get the money to fix his taxi? So the point I'm making is that the culture of impunity in this country is staggering. People do things and go free, from the level of the leadership right down to common people. And if that continues, then it becomes very difficult for people to trust the system, for the system to develop and to grow. So I think for me, for political leaders to live up to their political promises in providing the basic needs of people and ensuring that people are able to live a very decent and civil life. But at the same time, ensuring the rule of law will be very important, for healing and for this nation to reconcile going forward.
Professor Okechukwu, what do you think?
Oh, well, I was thinking the lady should go, so we don't seem to be oppressing her here. No. I don't know what you think.
That's not possible.
Well, she started the conversation, so I think she will pardon you for being the one who goes this time.
Okay, fine. Well, I'll just touch on two things. You spoke of statesmanship, and then you spoke of values. It's possible to be in public office and be a statesman. It's possible to be in public office, leave public office, and you join the committee of elder statesmen without being either an elder or a statesman, because you're still a parochial person. Now, the whole matter of statesmanship, sometimes it carries the mistaken assumption that a statesman has no personal or group interest, that is neutral, like something that fell from the moon. No. He is a man within a state. All his actions, the policies he supports, the ideas he defends are such that will create a stable state in which himself and others will be well taken care of. So he has his personal interests. He has a wife, he has children, he has his land, he has his farm. But he will not use his position as a public administrator to drive those personal interests. That's what makes him or her a statesperson, a statesman. So that we don't walk away with the idea that there are some people who are not engaged in public affairs, who are very pure, and unlike others who are contaminated and who are then the statesmen. If they are so pure, they should live here, go to heaven. That's where angels are, so that we sort ourselves out here. But for as long as they are here, the whole point of being a statesman is to mature so well that you can overlook what will interest you because it will affect others badly. So I thought I should make that point.
Right.
And having made that point, for the current government, it's possible for the president to be statesmanly. If you look at his record as governor of Lagos State, quite frankly, nobody knew he was a Muslim. And I was in Lagos. I thought I was involved in the June 12 elections as a presiding officer. I was teaching in Unilag at that time. Anybody in Lagos who said he knew Bola Tinubu was a Muslim, not people like me, I had no idea, quite frankly. And if you look at the kind of cabinet he ran, so he can actually carry on as a statesman. First of all, by the kind of appointments he makes. The geographical spread, but more importantly, the record of competence for people who can perform, the sense of equity he creates, how the kind of policies he drives, and all of that, and how much of the existing impunity he's able to pull down. Now, if people begin to see they can trust this man, one, at the level of the quality of personnel working with him, two, at the sense of inclusivity he has created by the appointment, three, by the kind of policies that are coming out, and four, by seeing that he's actually scaling down all the expenses that are affecting the nation badly, you see that trust. They will see, oh, he's a statesman, he's not a Yoruba man, he's not a Muslim. So I thought I should place that on the table and then come to the matter of trust. Trust is earned, like Jake, my friend, said. You see, but the whole matter of trust, a good deal of the time, and we've evolved a wrong political culture where dishonesty has become a very well-nourished industry. I come around, I do something that's totally of no value to anybody, but I've given money to the big men. We have a rally in the town, and everybody praises me. and I enter my SUV and move away again in a scale of dust. That will not build trust. Trust, and Yomi mentioned it, it's so total and it's so complete. And I raise issues so that we see them at the micro level, so we stop looking at Abuja and Buhari and Tinubu. If you go to most Nigerian villages today, assuming you left those villages in 1970, and you come back there today, you're likely to find the same village paths. You will not miss your way. But what you find is that there are very many new buildings, mansions in some of them, and fantastic mansions, but poverty still prevails. So you have a community where, because I've held public office, I'm now living at a level nobody can come to my house without being cleared by the policemen. The poverty prevails. They look at me as lucky because I've stolen and gotten free. And so what do you find? There is the mention and recognition of my visibility and importance in inverted commas, but distrust of me as a person from the angle of integrity. And you mentioned that when you spoke about people who will be embarrassed. You see, we have a political, economic, religious, and evil traditional elite that can no longer be embarrassed. And when I speak of being embarrassed, I'm a governor. I've read a budget for this year. I read for last year. All the issues on the budget are unaddressed. Poverty has increased. The roads are not fixed. I've gone to commission a borehole where my predecessor commissioned a borehole last year. So you find a continuous and convoluted chain of unshameable, highly visible individuals, and they are setting the wrong template. That's why when the last speaker was talking about the youth, leaders of tomorrow, you should first of all admit that tomorrow is in trouble. You should first admit that the youth has the wrong mentors. Many of them are looking for whom to be a seto. You carry a bag and say, it has no schedule. You have no skill whatsoever. You can't treat a file. You can assess a document based on the financial outlay. But you're hoping your boss will help you become head of a parastatal or a commissioner.
Professor
so
Okechukwu, I have to interject because now we're completely running out of time. And I still have to give Idad Hassan the final say on this segment.
If you don't give her, I'll carry a placard.
Idad Hassan, as we wrap up this segment, perhaps you can encapsulate, because I know that the new leaders are listening. Those who are disgruntled are listening as well. And therefore, what in your view is what you would describe as the first quick win that needs to be put in place now that begins to give people the impression that, yeah, okay, maybe it's time, maybe we can take a look at this and then build on that subsequently?
Okay, so before I get to that, I also think that information is power, and we should be careful the way we frame information. Jake actually spoke to the issue of INEC not speaking, and moving to the future is the way we communicate that actually matters. A statement was issued, but maybe it would have been better with a press conference to actually tell Nigeria what happened on that night of the elections. So that's the correction. But really, Nigeria needs patriots, not just statesmen. And we are all in this together, really, because we are united as one. There is an Idayat Hassan because she is a Nigerian. That is it. So one, we all need to be extremely patriotic, even to our country, not just our country being patriotic to us. But we actually need the inclusive government as something that is extremely important. The government, the new government has already hit the ground running, but Nigerians need to see that this will continue for 1 month, not just a 2-week stint, that it will run for the next 4 years, and it will translate to the delivery of public goods and services. Trust is earned. It is not given, really. And national unity is actually key. He who has emerged must be magnanimous in victory. At every point in time, they cannot walk on hearts with conceit. This is no longer a winner-take-all. And tomorrow will also be extremely indicative. What happens at the election of the National Assembly tomorrow will go a long way in actually assuaging the fears of Nigerians, giving them hope in terms of what is actually expected and what we also even expect as analysts, because now you cannot take the opposition for granted because they are now not an emboldened minority. They are a majority themselves in the House of Representatives. But what is important for Nigerians will be the delivery of public goods and services that makes their life better, that reduces the inequality which they currently face, and the end to impunity, which erodes all form of trust that we have in the country. They believe that, oh, there is no rule of law. Today you can slap somebody and you can get away with it. A new power has emerged, and the system of doing things will actually have to adhere to the way it is done in one part of the country. Impunity must end, and we must fuel Nigerians because we must have public goods and services being delivered to us as a right.
Indeed.
Not
we're at the stage. We're at the stage, Idayat Hassan, where I have to say thank you so very much for your time on the program today. The same for Atab Barkindo and Oke Kichuko, our guests in the Abuja studio, as well as Yomi Badijo Kusoya here and Jacob Pele. This conversation, very interesting. One would expect that those who are to take the key lessons from here and move forward on these twin themes will do the needful. Let's go straight to Ini John Mekwa with our audience. Ini, this is the time where we have some level of audience participation, isn't it?
Yes, this is the time. And I tell you, I have loads of questions, you know, from this conversation. No less. Getting the answers, I don't know. So I'm going to call just a few because of our time. And I'll plead with you once your name is called. Go straight to the question and do indicate who you would prefer to answer the question. So I'll start with Mr. Adeyi Ona Daniel. Please go straight to the question and do indicate who you prefer to answer your question.
Thank you very much. My name is Adeyi Ona Daniel. I'm a staff with the National Population Commission and the General Secretary, Urbanizing Association of Nigeria. Let me start my question with a quote. We all know this very famous American president, John F. Kennedy. And he says, think what you can do for your country and not what your country can do for you. We've been talking about how we need to recalibrate our unity, our economic development, our religious unity, and the likes. But from all these 3 hours or so discussion, I've come to realize that the summary of what we're talking is Nigeria needs to begin to unlearn some things that is happening, relearn some things we have learned before, and learn new things. The question, my public relations officer, is how? How do we unlearn, relearn, and learn new things to move this great country forward? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. A question there. I'll also take one question from Folashade Rojubokan. Please go straight and indicate who you would prefer.
How has change in population dynamics affected our democracy?
Who would you prefer?
Okay.
All right, seems you have your...
You seem to have you're on the hot spot.
Exactly.
Okay, so we got time for you to answer those 2 quick questions.
Okay. How do we really learn and unlearn? Do you know, I've never had any desire to work in government. I'm a private sector person, but there's only one post that will interest me, and that's the DG of the National Reorientation Agency. That is such a huge vehicle. I can run that office and I won't collect salary. Honestly.
It's on record.
Yeah, I can. You know why? Because that is the vehicle that can bring about the change that we're looking for. It is a vehicle that will give us the new values. It is a vehicle that Reverend Brackindo said that when you hit somebody's car, you've got to pay. The only reason why I drive carefully is because I understand that when I hit somebody, I will pay for it. But when somebody feels that I can do it and I will get away with it. Look, the problem in Nigeria is not corruption. The problem in Nigeria is impunity. I will do it and nobody will catch me. So if we get the orientation agency right, which goes back, including history in schools, including the way we run our businesses, including who becomes a mentor, just like we've said here, I tell you, that would turn around this nation. Secondly, because of time, how has demographic affected? We saw it in the last election. I don't want to, because if I say something, look, you know what the young people did? The young people carried a grudge and a grievance from 2020, and they carried it into 2023. They were like elephants, they didn't forget. And they said, oh, you, let me say something. When you look at a section of the population who are unhappy about something, and then you describe them as wailers, that doesn't work. And those people have now said that we will get, you know what, they didn't get it this time. It doesn't mean they can't get it next time. What it means is that they will go back, because really they are the ones that have the use of technology. So demographics has changed. Anybody that doesn't take the youth into consideration in the election, I just heard now that the president has signed the education.
The student loan bill.
What do you think he's
signed
doing?
it into law.
He's trying to reach out to...
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
it goes back to the issue of PR. It's at that point that we're going to have to leave it. Thank you so much, YBO, Yomi Badijo. So, that's the end of the segment. Incidentally, what he just made is a point that is worth noting, that the president has signed the student loan bill into law, which means that from the next academic session, students should be able to access
money,
finance to be able to pay for their tuition and other. The details will be revealed subsequently. Though I don't want anybody to quote me. I'm not a spokesman for government. But we'll take a break here at this point. We'll be right back with our next discussion. Do stay tuned with us.
Welcome back. It's still our June 12th special edition, a special broadcast, Democracy Day here on Channels Television. And we've been talking loads of issues with our very dear experts, panelists. We just finished talking about unity and national reconciliation before that break. And we'll be moving into another very important, some would say all-important segment. But before that, the person you're about to see who's going to give us perhaps a brief introduction about it has been on the floor. I mean, she doesn't only manage the floor when we have these kinds of interview or segments talking about any John
She's an economic guru herself.
Yes, she is, you know, top on that. So she has this tidbit of what the economy is, and we'll be looking at that right after her.
Just before you head into that economic conversation with your guest, now let's look at some details, or especially macroeconomic details of Nigeria at this time as President Bola Tinubu takes over power. Well, top on that list is inflation. We see inflation at 22.22% for April. We're expecting inflation figures to be out this week. And like the FDC, Financial Derivatives Company, have already said that they think it will hit 22.7%. The debt profile, also, we've been talking a whole lot about this. In fact, this is a major reason why President Bola Tinubu is insisting that we cannot continue with the subsidy regime, because it adds to, you know, what we have to borrow to sustain the economy. And closely related to that is that in 2022, the country was using more than 96% to service its debt. That was in 2022. I wonder what the numbers are now, the real numbers. And then you have GDP that slowed also. These are the things that the president has to deal with as he settles into power. Now, let's see what President Bola Tinubu's plan is to handle some of this thing. We can tell you that top on the list is that President Bola Tinubu has promised that there will be 6% GDP growth for this year, 2023. That's it. But can he achieve this? KPMC does not believe that this can be achieved even in 4 years, but we don't know what plans the president has. He does have some magic in his hat. And then he has talked about harmonizing the exchange rate. He said this, and it moved the market, the equities market, positively for days. We saw a lot of positive movement, but actually implementing it, it's another thing, because you also look at what about the supply of FX? Do we have extra supply of FX as a non-oil import, or even our oil import? Have they improved, to bring in more FX for that to happen? Then reducing interest rate. We know that the CBN has used interest rates as a major tool to curb inflation, even though that seemed not to be so active in Nigeria's case. Now that the president has promised to reduce interest rates, how do you balance that with dealing with inflation? Another thing for the president to deal with, and then reviewing corporate taxes system and making it more friendly. We cannot talk enough about increasing the tax net and employing technology into the tax net. Now, let's see one sector that has received a whole lot of attention from the president, and that's the oil subsidy. I mean, a lot of Nigerians, even the children now, talk about oil subsidy. We've seen oil subsidy regime has ended in Nigeria, according to President Bola Tinubu, and he has promised, consequently, to ensure stability of petroleum products. This is a promise following that there'll be more suppliers, more individuals will be able to import petrol into the country, and that will increase supply. Accelerated implementation of the Petroleum Industry Act, of course, that follows that, and stimulation of investment in the deep water asset. Now, we looked at electricity also. That's also a major one for Nigeria. A lot of Nigerians look forward to the day when you will have 24 hours, when you will not need, to buy petrol, not just for your cars, for generators, or diesel for generators, to reduce overhead costs for manufacturers especially. Eliminating estimated billing, a lot of strikes and a lot of protests have followed that. Domestic manufacturing of electricity meters, that's already on, but boosting it is another thing. Expanding the existing regime for the off-grid. And we saw that the president did a plausible thing last week, signing that electricity bill into law. And a lot of people are looking for how to explore, states especially, how to explore that. Now, let's see the other parts. It's agriculture. Food security is a major one for the country. In fact, some economists have said that a major driver of inflation in the country is issues like food. Because of insecurity, then farmers are not going to the farm, you have less supply, and so the prices are really high up there. But the president has promised that he will introduce a community boards to establish minimum prices for strategic crops. Top on that list is crop like cocoa, because Nigeria does have a huge potential, even in Ondo State alone, but that is minimally explored. And even when it's explored, there's no value added, just the raw crops being exported. So these are the issues, Ladi and Millicent, that yourself and your panelists will have to discuss as you sit to discuss Nigeria's economy this evening.
Thank you, Ini. And, she's listed a number of things. I almost couldn't keep up with the number of issues under this segment.
Yeah, there are a whole lot of issues, actually.
Yes, called the economy.
Tall order for the president. Very ambitious. Right from the get-go, he listed some of those things were consequences of what he listed. And, of course, oil subsidy is the buzzword now. As Ini pointed out, everybody's talking oil subsidy.
Even the children.
Yeah, even the children are talking oil subsidy. It's responsible for more aggression on the part of the younger ones, because their parents are not particularly happy either. But before I go into that, let's introduce our guests.
Yes, indeed. Let's begin with our guests who joined us here in Lagos. Mr. Taiwo Yedele, Fiscal Policy Partner, Africa, Tax Leader at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Also here is Shegun Ajayi Kadir, Director General, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
In Abuja studio, we have Yinka Okpeke, CEO of Smart Gas, and also Professor Joseph Nana, Chief Economist, African Development Bank. Thank you for joining us. Via Zoom, we understand, President of the Women of Mining Nigeria, Engineer Janet Adeyemi, has joined us, and also Bismarck Remwane, CEO of Financial Derivatives Company Limited. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you. I'd like to begin with our guest here in Lagos, and maybe I can start with you, Mr. Oyedele, and this is what we heard the president say today. He says he feels our pains when it comes to the fuel subsidy. Does he really feel the pain of Nigerians now that fuel subsidy is gone?
Thank you, and happy Democracy Day, Nigerians. I think it's important. I'd like to start by saying that democracy is important, but I think that the economy is even more important. And if you don't have a thriving economy where people see opportunities, then democracy will lose its essence. That's why Nigerians today, young and old, will be glad to leave the country and sometimes go to countries where they have no democracy. And even in countries where they have democracy, they're not likely going to be voting anytime soon, and they're happy with that. So we need to take that into account while we are celebrating democracy. So having said that, I think it's a good thing for the president to say, I feel your pain. But we have to go beyond that. You know, we just spoke about trust. Do I trust that? Does the average Nigerian on the street trust that? Does the small business owner believe that in the first place? How about the person in the village? So, and the way to do that is not just by saying it. It's by taking steps to show that you feel the pain. What people are talking about, for example, is you're asking us to make sacrifices. We have been making sacrifices. You want us to make more sacrifices, but you're not leading by example. Nigerians want to see the presidents lead by example. Nigerians want to see the lawmakers lead, the governors. And I think this is, you know, as much as I know that based on data, even if all the political appointees and elected officers don't collect 1 naira, Nigeria will still be a poor country. But it's symbolic. It's leading by example. It is setting the right tone. And then you can galvanize the population to queue behind you, knowing fully well that we can now trust you, that that pain that we're going through today, we will reap the benefit tomorrow and for generations coming after us. Until we get to that point, I'll say the president has started well. He needs to build on that, sustain it, and also go beyond just the federal government, because when my life is miserable, because I can't do my small business, whether it's coming from local government or state government or federal, it's irrelevant. I just know I'm a Nigerian and I can't function. So he needs to use the power of his office to make sure that even the subnationals, government agencies, from the police to the ports to the tax authority, we should just stop frustrating ourselves. It's almost like the knee on the neck. You need to remove it so we can breathe. And then democracy will become more meaningful.
That's what Jacob Pele talked about, the knee on the neck thing. So, I mean, talking about the knee on the neck, let me come to you, because you're manufacturers and the knees have been on your neck for much longer. I think you're beginning to adapt to the fact that the knee is never going to leave your neck. But it does appear as if there's a lot in what the president has said, both in his inaugural address and thereafter, that should be music to your ears. Uniform interest rates, stabilized exchange rates, and so on. This is music to your ears, but as Mr. Oyedele pointed out, do you believe this?
Well, okay. I think it's just customary that I join him to say Happy Democracy Day to Nigerians, but democracy will not mean anything except those people who have sacrificed time, resources, even life in the past have something to show for it. So I think I join him in saying that the president so far has always said the right things. Now is the time for him to put action to the words. So, but to go directly to what you're saying, we've had this nail on our neck since independence. But in more recent times, we have seen a situation where our government has only paid lip service to the plight of the manufacturing sector. And we have always said it, that there is no nation on earth that is considered wealthy or developed or prosperous that does not have a vibrant manufacturing sector. The sector has the greatest opportunity to create jobs, has the greatest opportunities to revive an economy and set the path to development. All over the world, governments directly and intentionally incentivize manufacturing. So for us, the president has spoken well against the backdrop that there's huge government trust deficit. We have been disappointed for a very long time. But you see, we have an adage around this part of the world that new broom sweeps clean. So far, he has said the right things. He has said that he will prefer that he supports domestic manufacturing as against importation. I mean, that is the best strategy any government can have, particularly now that AFCFTA has brought competition closer to us and much easier for us to deal with. He's also said that he's going to see a unified exchange rate. We have always advocated for that. And we know that if we do not have Forex to import raw materials, parts, and machines that are not locally available, we are not going to be able to expand our production and be competitive. So he has said the right thing in that. He's also spoken about multiple taxes and levies. And the critical thing he has said is that he's going to allow fiscal policy measures to support manufacturing. But there are very critical ones that he needs to deal with from day one. And that's when we take him seriously. As a matter of fact, we've had better promises, I must tell you. But
was there promises?
Yes, but they remain promises until we see intentional efforts. And there are very low-hanging fruits that I think in the course of our conversation we should be able to have. There are so many things that are waiting for him to redress, things that I've done in recent past that he just needs to come and put a stop to. There's the single-use plastic green tax policy that he needs to remove. There's the excise escalation that does not make any sense and will lead to the death of a sector that is most contributive to our GDP in terms of manufacturing. All those ones are waiting for him to do on day one. And I think he's still saying the right thing. He needs to do the right thing.
Well, we have gone beyond day one now. I think we're already on day 14.
Yeah, day 14.
But I think your point is well taken. Let me bring in Mr. Bismarck Rewane. And he has an unusual viewpoint of this because Bismarck Rewane was on the presidential economic team under the last administration. And so I want to find out from you, Mr. Rewane, coming from that background and what you've heard so far from the tax authorities and, of course, the manufacturers, and then now on the basis of what you have also heard from the president himself, are we on the right trajectory economically going forward, provided, as both the previous speakers have said, these words are backed with action?
Good evening, viewers. I'm happy to be here today to celebrate June 12 and the democracy principles. Coming back to the real issue, the point is that I listened to the president's inaugural speech, and the goals are very clear. He wants to achieve 6% growth from the current 2%. He wants to harmonize and unify. The word is he wants to unify exchange rates, and he wants to bring inflation under control. But at the same time, he thinks he can bring down interest rates. Therein lies the contradiction. If you are going to have a strong currency, if you are going to fight inflation effectively, you cannot have that and at the same time have low interest rates. Because it's all about growth, and growth is a function of investment. Investment is a function of savings, and therefore, if you increase interest rates to mobilize savings, then you would see, one, people will save and investment flows will be available. Two, international investors will bring their money in because the rates are high and the exchange rate is stable, so they'll be able to get their money out. Thirdly, and most importantly, is the fact that the international diaspora, Nigerian diaspora flows, which currently is at about $23 billion, can actually go as high as $50 billion and can make up for the shortfall in the visible flows, which is the trade flows, the oil flows, because they are coming back to seek a yield on their investments. So let's get that clear. But the most important variable in this whole equation is confidence of the people, confidence of investors, confidence of consumers, and confidence of manufacturers. Now, I think the previous panel, somebody talked about the trust deficit. The trust deficit is potent, it's there. Nobody believes the government. And so my suggestion, number one, is that let's sequence our actions first before promises of what to do. Let's deliver to the people. For example, if we are saying that we are giving all university and polytechnic students and teacher training college students full scholarship from the proceeds to be reaped from the petroleum subsidy, automatically the people feel the effect, ab initio. Then you collect the money from and use that to actually cover the holes created. But there are promises and there's no delivery, and there's also inefficiency and corruption in the system. But all I can say at this point is that the fact that the subsidy was removed, even though in a very disorganized manner, it's an intent to make sure that the Nigerian government cannot live continuously beyond its means. Two, the fact that monetary policy is going to be reformed completely and overhauled in a manner that is acceptable to global standards means that the exchange rate begin to harmonize and move in the right direction. But what I do know is that next month, we have a $500 million obligation maturity of the Eurobond, which we must pay. And the facts will come out as to what the true value and volume of our external reserves are, because we are making some assumptions that the data that we have is actually accurate. We must have accurate data about the true position of things. That's all I can say at this point.
Thank you, Mr.
A
Bismarck.
lot of food for thought there.
Indeed. I mean, that's a lot of money. Let's come over to our Abuja studios and to you, Yinka Okpeke. And this is also looking at your sector and the role that the pronouncement by the president plays. What would you say is should we be doing or looking at in terms of solving some of our economic woes?
Okay. I'd like to join my great speakers by wishing Nigerians Happy Democracy Day. And while I listened to the president's speech, which I would consider quite apt and coincides, I feel that his administration has an uphill task of making true of all those promises, because just like the other speakers have said, Nigerians have lost the confidence, in the leadership, and understandably so. And putting it in perspectives, I was looking at the numbers in terms of the importance of security, some of the big things. So I'd like to take it holistically first before I narrow it down a bit. And I look at security, I look at unemployment, as at now it's about 33%, out of which like 70% are the youth. And then I look at the issues of interest rates, it's about 22%, all-time high in 18 years or so. And then the GDP is 2.3%, which is even lower than the 3.1% as at 2022. And then we talk about the 2023 budget. It's about 21 trillion. 10 trillion of it is internally generated revenue. So 11 trillion of that is what? And then when you look at that, you look at how much of all that funds, it comes from servicing loans. Then how much of all that funds is going into expenditure, paying salaries and things like that, about 8.3%, and that's about 40% of the entire budget. And then you look at how much goes into servicing all of these loans, which is about 6.3 trillion, and that's like 29%. So holistically, you're saying about close to 70% goes into recurring expenses and things like that, and then just less than about 30% goes into social infrastructure, talking about education, talking about health, talking about roads, and so many other things. So all of that, and then on top of that, we talk about the subsidy. So while I commend the president for decisively removing the fuel subsidy. There's so much that still needs to be done. And now talking about bringing it home to our sector in the oil and gas, I look at it and I'm like, this is the right time for the government to start seeing how they can de-emphasize a lot of focus on oil. So Nigeria has been branded oil and gas, understandably so. But the truth of the matter is the gas sector, for example, I see that as a transition field in terms of like that is where a lot should be going into. And then in terms of agriculture, manufacturing, I look at, gas to cleaner energy to domestic use. I look at gas to industrialization, petrochemical industries, plastic, textiles. I look at gas to power, I look at gas to agriculture, to fertilizers and things like that. So there's a lot that needs to happen in that framework. I was actually reading one of the documents that was released by the government, by the president's team. He put together a team, an advisory, it's the oil and gas subcommittee of the what do you call that? Policy Advisory Council, exactly. And they made some very good recommendations in terms of seeing how the federal government can reduce their involvement in the onshore, and shallow water JVs and all of that. And that made sense to me because when they do things like that, it reduces the amount of bureaucracy, inefficiency, allows the indigenous oil companies to play in that space, and that increases efficiency because immediately, when I was looking at the numbers, I think they said it was up to maybe about, the value was about maybe $19 billion. I'm not really sure about the figures, but that helps them to also increase their revenue, and even though they still keep a lot of their revenues in terms of the upstream sector, so that's one thing that they can look into, and other things I believe that as we're speaking, I'll delve more into things like that.
Thank you, Yinka. Professor Nana, I just wanted to get your thoughts, and this is from what you've heard from our guests here in Lagos and also Yinka, who has, talked about a number of things, the problems, the challenges, and some of the solutions that she's proffered.
And we want you to take a look at this, of course, from the fact that, you're chief economist at the African Development Bank, and the African Development Bank is one of several multilateral organizations that is involved in Nigeria's economy. So, when people talk about building trust, it's one of those institutions that we need to build trust in, apart from the World Bank, the IMF, the Islamic Development Bank, and other such institutions that we're currently involved in. So, again, do you trust the trajectory that it seems as if we're following now?
Thank you for having me. By the way, let me just correct the narrative. I am the chief economist of the Development Bank of Nigeria, not the African Development Bank. But that being said, I will say this. In terms of trust, trust is a prerequisite for any transaction to be consummated. And now the president has spoken well and has followed through with some of the things he said during his inaugural address. Subsidy was removed from day one. While it wasn't removed in a coordinated manner, some might say, but at least he had the courage to act. And that has taken some great time, painstakingly, to achieve this. So fuel subsidy is gone, and let's just get used to it. And the truth of the matter is now we have to find a way to find palliatives to support folks at the bottom of the pyramid. Our behavior will have to change. Instead of driving cars, maybe CNG gas buses and so on. But that's by the way. Broadly looking at the macros, the inflationary pressure still is there. Food input price inflation from food is there, 24% and inching upwards. Insecurity challenges, endogenous, that's there. So what I will say here is this. Because we know that there are a lot of endogenous as well as exogenous problems affecting the real economy in Nigeria, the uphill battle is there, but we know truthfully that the president is actually courageous enough to follow through on some of his promises. So we'll see where the next step is in terms of unifying the exchange rate. That's not going to be an easy task. While I appreciate the DG of man, unification is important. It makes everybody more competitive. As far as the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, if we don't unify the exchange rate, the truth of the matter is we'll be at a comparative disadvantage with industries in other peer countries, and Nigeria will consequently be a dumping ground for those goods. And you can just point to other countries to see where the flow of goods is actually going into Nigeria. But if you take a look at now the exchange rate dynamics, as soon as he mentioned the unification of the exchange rate, we saw a fluctuation in terms of what the official rate, or the I&E window, if you will, as well as the parallel market. Right now, it's at 765 and depreciating further. But I do believe it will stabilize once things kind of get more clearer in terms of perspectives. But ultimately, like the previous speaker, Mr. Verwani did say, he is questioning the veracity of the reserve balance. The reserve, we point fingers at the reserve a lot. For me, the reserve is just for import coverage. If we have enough for import coverage, it's much ado about nothing. But that's just one man saying this, of course. But the real truth is, if we take a look at what we can do in terms of raising and diversifying the revenue base of the economy, that's where we need to focus on. So the oil and gas sector is one of them. Agriculture is another. Manufacturing is another. We can go on and on and on, but ultimately is a diversification of the revenue base. And these policies that have to speak to the people will now tell us whether trust is going both ways. I'll pause there. Thank you.
Let me come back to you then, because again, it comes back to what people popularly call headwinds. Now, as you said, the headwinds have been there for a very long time. They've just been exacerbated by more recent events, not excluding things like the war in Ukraine, the COVID-19 pandemic, and so on, which we did not have direct control. No Nigerian government could have said anything or planned for any of those things. But now, with something like the fuel subsidy and the fairly disorganized manner in which it was removed, there are going to be some headwinds. We've already started seeing those headwinds. I mean, I was speaking to someone who said to me that, in the morning of the presidential inauguration, he was on his way to the southwest, Ibadan, and he bought a melon at 800 naira on his way. And then when he was coming back the next morning, the same melon was 2,000 naira. And so he was saying, look, what was responsible for the change? And he said, did you listen to the president? So there are headwinds in terms of what people can afford. Already, I think somebody mentioned the idea that we need to change our attitude. Many bicycles have returned to the streets and so on. So again, the idea is that how many businesses will survive in the short term before all these policies that we've talked about so far come to fruition and then begin to benefit them?
Yes, I think that there's a popular saying that there's no gain without pain. It's quite unfortunate, and I believe that it's an issue you need to consider very seriously. There are implications for government, for the individual. There is also an implication for businesses. You have this situation, somebody has a deep cut, and the blood is oozing out. And you say until you have the surgeon, until you have the bandage, until you have an ambulance and so on, you are not going to stop the bleeding. You are best served to just stop the bleeding. Subsidy was bleeding Nigeria. We needed to stop it. And I think that the president took that decision because he knew that if he would allow time, what happened to the previous leaders that they couldn't remove it will happen to him. So he did it from day one, and we are dealing with the challenges. It's going to be very difficult for businesses. But you see, every situation that comes, you must look at it in a dynamic and progressive manner. We are going to have costs going up, and they have gone off. But we need to look at what will have happened if we didn't remove it. We have a deficit budget of 12 trillion. 7 trillion is subsidy. That does not help anybody. We are fueling, we are feeding foreign production. You see, fuel that we are buying that is being subsidized is not produced locally. If it was produced locally, I would have been a very happy man, because what you are doing, you are incentivizing, you are subsidizing local production. But so, if you want to benefit from the oil industry in Nigeria, it's better for you to go and establish a refinery outside of Nigeria, because we now have an appetite for it. Refineries are closing in Benin Republic. because we have just removed subsidy. So I think what government has done is to stop the bleeding. Then it now comes to individual, like I said, to businesses, and to even government. Government should not tell us to tighten our belts without tightening its belt. We need to ensure that we patronize local products, for instance, so that we can expand manufacturing, so that we can expand productivity. We need to be able to plow back the money, and people should see results immediately. We have issues of lack of power supply. It's not only vehicles that you use petrol for. People buy petrol to put in their generators. If you improve power supply, they won't have to put it in their generators. You cannot tell us that we should mind the way we fuel our cars and run around, and then Mr. President or Mr. Governor or even the local government chairman is traveling, and there are 40, 50, 30, 20 vehicles on his trail. He should cut it. I mean, so that we all know that we are facing a dire situation, and then we'll be able to plow back the money into the process. Government needs to demonstrate leadership. Government needs to also communicate with the people. Now, nobody is going to come and invest in our economy if you know that the price is controlled. Why should I go and establish a modular refinery, for instance, when I know that I'm not going to sell because government has reduced the price for the ordinary people to buy? How are we going to ensure that we do not have a system that promotes corruption? During Okonjo-Iweala last time, she did mention that there was a time they did an audit on 6.4 trillion worth of subsidy. They discovered a fraud of 2.5 trillion. When she wanted to stop it, her mother was kidnapped. So it shows that there is serious fraud in all of this, and we just needed to solve it. So the pains that we are having, I think there are legitimate claims that government should not cause pain for the people. And government should realize it. They shouldn't take the patience of Nigerians for granted. The fact that we've been able to avert a national strike should be a warning to Mr. President that he needs to do something and do it quickly. And he needs to demonstrate leadership by showing it in himself. He shouldn't have a retinue of wasters.
Yeah, indeed. At that point, let me bring in Engineer Janet Adeyemi, who is the president of Women in Mining in Nigeria, because that's another sector where we're having a lot of potential and wastage. Engineer Adeyemi, welcome to the program. I don't know what you make of economic policy at this point and how that has affected the idea about diversification, because what everybody has said so far has to do with that. And mining would have been one of the areas that we could have exploited. But as usual with many other sectors, what is going on there is opaque, is not transparent, and therefore we're not getting full value. What do you make of this?
Thank you so much. Let me join others to say Happy Democracy Day to Nigerians. I'm happy you raised the issue because you can see that even in the course of discussion, you can see how opaque the mining sector is. Because when you are talking about diversification, I would have expected the earlier speakers to quickly jump to mining. Mining, as we know, today we are all enjoying fossil fuel, but Nigeria is not in isolation. We live in a global space, and that global space is shifting gradually from fossil fuel to clean energy. And if you must go through that energy transition, whether you want to go rapidly, whether you want to go slowly, or whether we want to be just about it, you must embrace what you call energy minerals, critical minerals, strategic minerals. But coming in terms of looking at the economic potential of the mining sector, you and I know that mining was literally killed in Nigeria, the characteristic manner of Nigerians, because when we found oil, the fossil fuel, we jettisoned what we used in building the initial economy of Nigeria. Tin mining started as far back as 1902. Gold and coal all before that time. You understand? Yeah, we are what was used in building Nigerian economy. And as of 1916, more than 900,000 tons of coal was exported out of this country, with over 8,000 people working in the mine site. Well, what became of all those things? So that system completely shut down, and we left the space for illegality. So when you talk about contribution, what the mining sector has been able to contribute since the Obasanjo era, you understand, when, you know, thank God for the weaponization of the fossil fuel, that is oil and gas, which forced us to start looking at alternatives. And if we must develop the economic potentials of this country, we must look at mining, we must look at agriculture, we must look at entertainment, we must look at ICT, we must look at sports. Those are front burner issues now to be supported, you know, because it's only a healthy man that can generate income, supported by the health sector, you know, supported by some other education sector, because you must equally have the skill. So these things are very important. And I believe that the president haven't looked at it all. He has served in various capacities as a senator, as a governor, and now he's coming in as a president. He saw the gap. He saw the problems. How can a nation survive? I represent CSPF in the World Bank, and in the last spring meeting we had in DC in April, it was clear that all African countries are in trouble. Nigeria alone with 77 trillion naira. The whole of African countries is owing about $1.8 trillion. And no country is willing to give any money for that. World Bank is not willing to even support any project. So how do you survive? So going back, they have no choice other than to remove the subsidy. The subsidy, you understand, is a drain pipe. And you have found out that a few, less than 0.005% Nigerians exploited the rest of Nigerians, you understand, draining the economy, you understand, with subsidy. So removing subsidy, I think, is a good thing. But how do we move further? Moving further is where the president now must be very innovative. You must now find a way of meeting the yearnings of those people who never benefited from the subsidy, because the subsidy was a thing, or it's for the very rich. And how do you address that? You address that through some other policies, friendly policies, like you tax the rich so much. You look at their housing program, you tax it. Everywhere loot was taken to, that is, go to Abuja, you find quite a number of locked up estates. People not building, just use it to tie down their capital, since they know they cannot even at times take the money out of the country because of the strict economic restrictions on the financial restrictions on inflows and outflows. So governments should look at property tax and look at houses that are not occupied, look at the category of houses, come up with very innovative strategies like that to do that. And just like an earlier speaker said, the size of governance must be trimmed. All this SA to PA to PA to SA must vanish in the system. Then let us, if we must adopt a social security system, let's come up with a social security system to make it work. So looking at all these things, we now have to focus on areas that need to be focused on, such as mining. Mining, so many laws, so many policies have been in place, but because of the dominance of the ASM people who are not educated, it becomes obviously extremely difficult to do to realize any meaningful results. And then again, you look at the mining sector. The mining sector in totality has contributed about 3.3 billion naira to Nigerian economy. What is 3.3 billion naira? When you just oppose it with the kind of equipment needed and all that, so that tells you that the sector is still not where it ought to be. So many incentives are being given, but this is the time to rejig. This is the time to strengthen and come up with serious regulatory frameworks that are robust, that we take into cognizance all the various policies, such as the African Mining Vision, the Agenda 2063 of the AU, the UN document. Look at and make our law extremely robust to attract investors to be able to come in. Because what you have most times are not real investors. Very few investors are in the mining space.
We have about 5 minutes. We have about 5 minutes to end this segment, so I'm going to divide the time very quickly. I'm going to give you, Mr. Idele, 90 seconds now, just to talk quickly about the issue of taxes, which Mr. Kadri considers very important. What to do?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Taxes, taxes, taxes. So the president mentioned these and we all got excited. But we need to now translate that into concrete action plan. Number one, the past administration introduced two important changes to the tax system at the last minute. One is the fiscal policy measure that was introduced end of April, increasing the excise duties on tobacco, on non-alcoholic beverages or alcoholic beverages, single-use plastic, almost without any consultation. This is in addition to increases that had been announced previously as of 2022 to 2024. Some of those increases up to 100%. And this is a sector when, because we introduced the Naira redesign policy that was badly designed and poorly implemented, many of them had decline in their sales in double digits, and some of them closing down their plants. Now, in addition to that, 28th of May, the previous president signed the Finance Act 2023 into law to take effect immediately. We didn't even know he had signed until a few weeks later. We're already in default, increasing tertiary education tax, introducing new taxes to crypto. This is not ideal. The current president has promised, I will review the complaints of investors and manufacturers, deal with unfriendly investment and policies, unfriendly investment policies. So he now needs to translate that very quickly. First, do an executive order. Suspend all those last-minute laws and changes. You don't do laws in a hurry, right? Engage and use data. Evidence to make decisions is extremely important. And the best way to raise tax revenue is not, if someone is in intensive care, you can't ask them to give a little bit more blood, right? The best way to grow tax revenue is to grow the economy. When you grow the economy, a natural law will follow. Your revenues will go up. So this way of doing things in a way that is disjointed, we have to stop that, engage people, speak to them, and then let's make progress. If you just start by harmonizing the taxes we have, there are too many of them. We need just a single digit in terms of number of taxes. We can make 40 trillion naira from just 4 taxes if we manage it well. Then the revenue agencies are too many. Let there be just one revenue agency collecting revenue and taxes for government, and then use data for intelligence. So if I have houses in Abuja, Lagos, Abuja, even Dubai, right? Exchange of information, and Nigeria has signed with over 100 countries. Use the existing data and intelligence to collect the existing taxes. Stop adding more to those taxes. It's not working.
I want to go to Mr. Bismarck Rewane, and this is, with all that we've talked about, how indeed does, all of these translate and affect, because they do affect the common man, at the end of the day. Will forming the cabinets or who, holds one ministry or the other, will that affect the economy? Talking about the decision this new administration has to make, and then what do you see them doing? What should they do that would ease things for that Nigerian man, the ordinary man on the street?
Yes, thank you, Millicent. The truth is that at the end of the day, what is most important to an economist is the welfare of the people. You can have all the indicators looking positive, but if the people are unhappy, then you will have happy statistics and unhappy people. 1. 2, I've heard all the analysts say here that subsidy has been removed. No, the truth is that subsidy has been reduced. If the subsidy is removed, then the price of PMS, as you see today, will be much higher than what it is. Now, having said that, 3 is that policy reform is not the same thing as institutional reform. What you're seeing today, because of all of these things on the internet, is that the institutions that actually implement policies in Nigeria are rotten. And that you need to reform those institutions all the way from administration of justice to taxes to monetary policy. All of those institutions need to be reformed so that there'll be no impunity. 4 is that you cannot do partial equilibrium analysis. In other words, you cannot fix the interest rates and leave the exchange rate alone. You cannot fix petroleum subsidy and leave debt alone. So it has to be a comprehensive package where everything is looked at the same time. And then you begin to go towards general equilibrium. 4 is that the people are the owners of the country. The leaders are the servants of the country. So we need to change that mindset so everybody knows that you have to hold the feet of policymakers and politicians to the fire. I think we've seen a lot of that in the last few days. Anybody who is in position of authority now knows that it serves the people. Now, the truth is that also, I heard something about minimum wage review. Price inflation, wage inflation, inflation expectations all come together. There's no way you can do this. You can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. So we have to be, first and foremost, honest with the people. We have to put the facts on the table. What exactly, what is our population? What are our net external reserves free of encumbrance? What is the true price of oil? What's the oil revenue? When we now have the facts, we now know how to utilize it and how to optimize the resources that Nigeria has. Without optimization of resources, you will have suboptimal outcomes. And that is where we are going. But to answer your question as to what is going to happen to the ordinary man, there's been almost a 200% increase in the price of EMS. But it's not a one-on-one relationship. We've seen a 50% increase in the local transportation costs. We've seen, we believe, from my regression, we've seen that inflation now at 22.7 for the month of June, if it comes out this week. We think that inflation will go as high as 25% in June and about 28% in July. If you have that kind of inflation and you are also wishing to have lower interest rates, then you need a review of your, you need to go back to 001 economics. So I think that, one, we have to accept that effective interest rates in the country will increase to actually make the people save more. We think that the price of loans, unsubsidized loans, are going to go higher. We believe that there will be impairments and some loans will go bad. But at the same time, we would see a major flow of investments when the exchange rate stabilizes at a level that is acceptable. Investments will increase, there'll be an investment multiplier, and that the level of unemployment and all of these other variables, everything will get better. But like I said, short-term pain, medium-term gains, but credibility of those in office who must stop the hemorrhaging, and more than anything else, reforming the institutions. It's not about who is in the job, it depends on what job and where the people in those jobs know what they cannot do. There's too much abuse and leakages in the system. That has to stop immediately. Thank you.
All right, then, with that, much as I would have liked our other guests to weigh in a bit more on this, we have to end this segment because we've still got one more segment that is a very important segment.
Yes, but we have questions also from our audience on the economy.
Ini, this one will have to be quite sharp and straight to the point.
All right. Okay, all right. So I have, I think a lot of the questions have actually been answered, but I'll just call Mr. Mark Oniokeke to share his own question.
Hi, good evening. My name is Mark Oniokeke. I'm the Managing Director for Cummins West Africa Limited. Thanks, Mr. Shego and Taiwo, for speaking passionately. My comment will be really around Forex. Right, harmonizing the exchange rate sounds like a really great idea. However, we spoke about making it available. I think that's a great idea. I love the initiative. Nigeria is a consuming nation, not a manufacturing nation. And if we don't make those Forex available, the manufacturing industry will go away, right? And to me, that's a big threat, right? So I think the government needs to help the manufacturing industry have access to those Forex. There's no other way to make Nigeria a manufacturing hub for the rest of Africa and the rest of the world. So my question goes to Taiwo. What's your advice to the government in order to make sure that Forex is available for the manufacturing industries? Because we're suffering. We're really, really going through a lot of hell trying to access those Forex. We can't get materials. We cannot manufacture. At the end of the day, it's going to impact the employees. It's going to impact the environment in which we operate. Thank you.
All right, just one more quick one. We have to take Ahmad because he came all the way from Abuja to be part of this. So we need to appreciate him and for traveling that far and joining the audience here and share your question.
With reduced subsidized fuel.
Thank you very much. I think my question is quite concise. We know how businesses have been suffering, especially multinationals, and I like the fact that my boss here, Mr. Taiwo, have already spoken about multiple taxation. Now, a lot of businesses have been finding it very difficult. It has been a serious bottleneck. Some haven't gone as far as winding up because of issues of multiple taxation. So my question is, what are the strategies the government can put in place to reduce the taxes and harmonize the taxes? Very, very important, because I think that is one news that all businesses have been excited about, and they are waiting for the next action point on that. Thank you to Mr. Tayo.
All right, over to you.
Thank you very much. So the first question, thank you very much. I do think that there are low-hanging fruits. Maybe we should even say there are fruits on the floor. Just pick them up. Number one is we've created, I'm addressing the FX question, we've created unnecessary demand against the Naira, such that within Nigeria, there are legal requirements as well as government MDAs demanding payments in foreign currency. Exactly. So it's in the tax laws all over the place. Even some government MDAs and agencies, from Port Authority to the master, they ask you to pay dollars in Nigeria. So you go and queue in the Forex market where there's no Forex, create unnecessary demand. When you find it, you're lucky. If you can't find it, buy at parallel markets, give to government, they recognize it at 460. It's completely insane. Then the second thing is, with the removal of first subsidy, I do disagree with my brother, Mr. Bismarck. I think it's completely removed.
Reduced.
Yes. So he's saying reduced because there's still FS subsidy. But that's easier to control than the cost under recovery. Now, with the removal of subsidy, what's going to happen is I expect there should be a reduction in consumption by close to 50%. That happened about 13 years ago when we removed the subsidy on diesel. And it wasn't that they transfer consumption to petrol. It just disappeared. Yes. That saves you around $8 billion that you no longer have to spend on fictitious consumption, some of it going to other countries. You can prioritize manufacturing, right? Prioritizing them will have a ripple effect because you create more employment. And then we also have this provision. Mr. President also promised that he wants to create about 1 million digital economy jobs. I'll tell you today, we have provisions in our laws that make it impossible, unless you don't have the knowledge, for a foreign company to employ a Nigerian who is in Nigeria to work for them. Because our law says, well, you made a mistake, just employ someone in Nigeria. You've created a permanent establishment. You must come to Nigeria, file returns, pay taxes. Nobody is doing that anymore. Those were the things we inherited over 60 years ago. Let me
put you on pause, because this same question you raised, I want the chief economist of the Development Bank of Nigeria to weigh in on this. And because we're completely out of time now, Professor Nana, I want you to do this in 60 short seconds. Please just weigh in on this issue of Forex, because as we have heard, it's critical.
Okay, thank you. Well, in terms of Forex, the challenge, as every speaker has said, is real to the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria and a plethora of other Nigerians trying to access Forex. But the truth of the matter is this: it's the demand and supply game. So if we cannot generate foreign direct investments coming in, we can generate FX indeed, then clearly there's always going to be that excess liquidity in Naira and illiquidity in dollar, putting extra pressure on the Naira for the devaluing or depreciating, as they will say, or adjustments. But the truth of the matter is this: I personally feel that problems can be solved by doing a couple of things. Strong men, weak institutions has been the name of the game for Nigeria for a very long time. Perhaps we can now put the right people in the right places to introduce reforms, which Mr. Rwani has already said. And we need the right people to do this reformation of these institutions, because ultimately it's through these institutions impact can be made. And if households and MSMEs don't feel it, then guess what? The country, as far as I'm concerned, is in dire problems in perpetuity. So we have to remember this. Strong men, weak institutions. We have to reform our institutions for strength, for growth, for the future, and use technology to drive this change. We can use technology to track people, to generate revenues, to tax people, and so on. Let's do it.
Thank you.
I'll pause there. That's where we're completely out of time now.
Honestly.
Completely out of time.
And we need to go to another sector where all of this is hinged on, and that's security.
Because none of what we've talked about so far is possible. But before we do that, let's thank Professor Joseph Nana, who just spoke. Yinka Peke in Abuja studios, Engineer Janet Adeyemi, who joined us virtually. Same with Bismarck Rwani. And then, of course, here in the Lagos studios, Shegun Ajayi Kadri and Taiwo Oyedele. Thank you all very much for your contributions on this segment. We'll take a quick break and then go to our Abuja studios for the very last segment of the show. Do stay on with us.
The 2023 Democracy Day, it's June 12th, and it's home stretch at this point in time. We've got two gentlemen joining us now to just talk about security. Kabir Adamu is here with us in our studios. He is the Managing Director of Beacon Consulting Limited. Thank you for coming on, and we thank you very much indeed for your patience throughout for some hours now. And then we also do have Dr. Bala Hassan, who is a retired Assistant Inspector General of Police, also a legal practitioner and lecturer in the Department of Psychology, University of Lagos, who joins us from our studios in Lagos. Thank you as well for joining us and for your patience as well on the program today. Mr. Adamu, all right, let me start with you, Mr. Adamu. Well, I know the president in his speech did talk about how he did ask us Nigerians to sacrifice a little more for the survival of our country. And if I could paraphrase some of his speech in paragraph 19, where he did say, "For your trust and belief in us, I assure you that our sacrifice shall not be in vain. The government I lead will repay you through massive investments in transportation." And then he went on to say that infrastructure, education, regular power supply, healthcare, other public utilities that will improve the quality of our lives. We know that when these kind of things happen and then you have protests here and there, security agencies are usually on their toes because they know this could breach security. So, which leads us into our focus here today. And in the speech, I thought I was the one I looked for some parts of security in the president's speech. So maybe because he didn't want to lump so much in that, but I didn't see that. But you also went through that. How, of course, we know how hugely important that is. So from your reading, what do you think could have happened there?
Yeah, I think there is a link between our democracy and then security. So whether we speak directly on security or not, the mere fact that we're advancing democracy, which of course we're doing by marking June 12th, and the president definitely emphasized that. He talked about sacrifices made by those whose lives were given to June 12th, and then of course reminded us that we also need to make more sacrifices. For me, that in itself is a realization that by advancing our democracy, then we're actually supporting the growth of security within the country. Why is that? The three ingredients that we're trying to achieve and for which the president has spoken about, inclusion, diversity, and equity, would better be achieved in a democratic setting than outside the democratic setting. So to that extent, whether he directly spoke about security, which he didn't, but the mere fact that he's advancing democracy, the entirety of that speech was actually about.
So it doesn't mean that we're taking it for granted.
Definitely.
The way it is.
Definitely.
Right.
Well, let me take the next question to AIG in Lagos. Mr. Kabir Adamu has expressly stated that, well, the president didn't speak directly to security. And he's delivered two speeches now. From those two speeches, the economy largely has been the focus. So I'm going to ask you whether you think that security has taken the back burner, or, as they usually would say, they say if you address the economy, security would largely be taken care of. Do you think that that is where we currently are? Or do you think that we should look after security before we can now begin to talk about repairing the economy?
Well, by and large, the security is intertwined with the economy, because if the economy is buoyant, virtually people have job, the rate of employment has decreased, the GDP has increased, and so on and so forth. There will be less crime in the society. So by and large, when the president talk about strengthening democracy, equity, justice for the people, indirectly he's talking about enhancing security. And mostly, you don't need to see where the direction of the feeling of the president by what he mentioned. Because a day after he came to office, he summoned the service chiefs to his office and directed them that they must work in harmony, so they should not work in conflict. That enough gave the security community sense of belonging, that they are going to work together for the peace and happiness of Nigerians. Because when there is peace and security, then definitely the other things will follow, like economy, development, and other things that Nigerians are praying for will come in. After all, what is the responsibility of government? Under Section 14(1)(b) of the Constitution is welfare and security of the people. So we wouldn't say that the president has jettisoned actual security in his speech. By his actions, he showed that security is very, very important and is ready to give Nigerians the best in terms of security and other social goals.
Well, interesting. I mean, it's a good thing you made reference to that, and the president underscoring the importance of the security agencies needing to work together. It's also very important to underscore the fact that one of the problems he initially had to quell was the DSS taking over the offices of the EFCC in Ikoyi, Lagos, and I think they were asked to leave those offices, even though the DSS says, oh, they used to be our offices. But this is what we've noticed, this internal wrangling. We also saw his visit to the new counterintelligence security agency. I think it's a new edifice that has just been built here in Abuja, and he underscored again the need for security agencies to work together. But how big a problem would you say that security currently is? I mean, unlike in President Buhari's 2015 speech, where he, Boko Haram was a major concern and everybody wanted something very urgently done about it. I think in his inaugural address, he asked the Chief of Army Staff at that point to move their office to Borno State. And we saw that, make him featuring very prominently in his inaugural address. How big would you say that security still is as a problem for Nigeria?
Well, security problem is still a challenge to Nigerians, because to the ordinary man, they need security to do most of the things that will translate into well-being of the people. About 3-4 days ago, there are reports that some farmers in Sabon Birni, somewhere in Sokoto, that have boundary with Zamfara State, some bandits went to them that they must pay 10 million naira to enable them to go to their farms. And these are people who ordinarily they have been farming for ages without being subjected to this type of problem. So this type of problems will translate into economic problems, because the cost of production of food will be high, and of course to the consumers definitely is not a good development. So the president has also to think very well that the crisis of security crisis in northeast, that is Boko Haram, which is still there. In the northwest, we have these challenges of the bandits trying to collect money from poor farmers to enable them to go to the farm. So this must stop. We shouldn't think that security challenges are finished. If you go to the east, to the southeast, the issue of IPOP is still there. So we cannot say since the exit of that regime we have solved the security problem of Nigeria. We have to need more. He has to do it on his service chiefs, the present one there. If you want to employ, appoint others, you should look at the qualification, the people who can deliver the goods, so that there is no society without crime, but they should take into cognizance people who are able to deliver the job.
Okay, let me come to you, Mr. Adamo. Would you say that we're getting distracted? When you look at the myriad of challenges that we have in the area of security, the AIG has enumerated quite a number of them. Economies, of course, taking a huge part of the front burner right now. And, I mean, fuel subsidy removal, you cannot take that away. People are feeling the pinch immediately and directly. But do you think that there will be anything that will come up as a result of that could impact our security negatively?
No, definitely. One of the things that was mooted today, and we saw how the security infrastructure in the FCT responded to it, was a planned protest by civil society organizations. And if you had moved around in the FCT, especially in the municipal council area, you would have seen the deployment of security forces, a robust deployment actually beyond what in the ordinary you would have observed. That is the security forces responding to intelligence, quote unquote, of a planned protest. Apart from that, if the organized labor action had gone on, like they said they would, good thing there was some level of engagement and then they decided to call it off, they would usually enforce the strike action, and that too would have represented a level of security. And then, of course, in today's world, there's what we call protest 2.0, where apart from the actors themselves, you have other levels that become engaged into the protest action, what we ordinarily call hooligans. And then other names that are associated.
There are questions about that when you talk about, security agents being deployed on Democracy Day. People will say, isn't democracy about expression? I mean, there'll be huge questions about that, but I'm sure we have another guest.
But before that, I'm just wondering, I mean, what should we expect from this president being a military person like his predecessor? And one key thing now is the attitude of security agencies towards citizens. We know that usually there's this us and them kind of scenario, how hostile they are to those at the first line of security. So, yes, we've seen him give directive to the security agencies work together, not at cross purposes. If anyone stands in the way, the person will be removed. So, do we expect any particular kind of behavior in this dispensation from him?
So I would answer your question in two ways. Number one is to look at the renewed hope agenda that was released by Mr. President, during the campaigns, upon which we saw an indication of what he said he was going to do. Okay. And then the speech he gave during his swearing-in at the Eagle Square. In that speech, he talked about reform. He talked about looking at the doctrine behind the security agenda. So both military and then the other security agencies' doctrine. Now, for me, Democracy Day is a quintessential moment for Nigeria. It represents the aspirations of all Nigerians. Sadly, those that waved that flag lost their lives to it. How did they lose their lives to it? Sadly, because of the actions which we all condemned of some members of the security agencies. So it is quintessential to the point that in the renewed hope agenda, the president is promising to look at the doctrine that drives security. And frankly, we don't need to reinvent, the entire situation, because in our revised National Security Strategy 2019, which is a document that is existing and it's live, we were told that there is going to be a shift in the security paradigm from the state-centric approach to security to the human-centered approach to security. In other words, protecting the dignity, the civil rights of the average Nigerian. So that, for me, it's pick that document up and begin the implementation of that document through reforms and then through an improvement in security sector governance. Now, these two things are very technical issues: security sector reform and security sector governance. Time will not allow me to go into the details of it, but the essence of it is to have that paradigm shift so that the average Nigerian, that person in the village, is able to correlate the action of the security agencies with his or her human rights. The moment we do that, and I think we'd have achieved the essence of what this day represents to every Nigerian.
Okay. Well, we also have Professor Dikwa, who joins us on my studios in Maiduguri. Prof, thank you for holding on the program today. So could you tell us then, yes, it's Democracy Day. Yes, there's a new government in place, and he's also been actively involved. He was and still is. Are there expectations concerning security, particularly given where you are, how challenges that they face security-wise? So what, if there are, what would you say those concerns are, and expectations as well?
Thank you, Chamberlain. And earlier on, failure to network, we couldn't get with you. And as Ladia Corridolo Alese also did his best, we couldn't make it. Now it is the time. You see, Chamberlain, 30 years down the line, and from 1993, when the mandate was trashed, disturbed, and the people also, at that time, everybody had an Abiola of their family. Almost every family had Abiola inside because he had not had the intention of running for the presidency as well. It was a circumstance that put him to do it. And eventually, you have a Tinubu liking that particular person, that he had all along been mentoring others to do the right thing. And those who mentored, he mentored, all of them were successful and made sure that they served their country better. And this is the time for him now to do it himself with others whom he mentored will come around to also contribute their best, and that those who have never had the opportunity of serving will have a test in it, a jump, not necessarily learning on the rope, but it will take, it's a departure from the narrative of waiting a long time when people, intellectuals and so on, give their advice and so on, hardly responded to, including urgent issues were hardly responded to. I spent the other time I listened to Maope Ogun showing her, venting her annoyance over it, and that happened, including lives were involved, and the previous ones didn't do it. And that 30 years of Abiola is now here with people to the deal or the of people of Tinubu and Shetima having a down-to-earth ability to confront the issues we have been having, and that a tiny, less than 1% people who are maneuvering, doing the thing, forming the mafia of its own against any good intention of government. This is an opportunity to all of us contribute to the leadership of this country with somebody who is honest now, who is honest, and that we may also do it as if those who are from outside, people hate to talk about conspiracy theories, but it is obvious with technology now we are able to talk to our colleagues outside there who have always blocked Nigeria from leading the continent to prosperity, to get the basic developmental infrastructure in place. You don't see them, but you will see them pulling down everything in Nigerian, including why is it that Nigeria couldn't afford electricity 63 years down the lane. The same thing happening with us in terms of refinery with the trillions spent. They are sunk into it, yet we couldn't get the 4 refineries functional. And we could even have built others in addition to those ones. They are not visible, but those who are foot soldiers are known to the security agencies. And therefore, we have to do something better, different from the past, where they had malls from all over. And that, again, for once, let us do it for our country so that the human resources, the experts, are not taken away from us. Imagine a bad, what do you call it, a meager pay cost our doctors. Thousands of them had to go outside. And now they are even after our nurses. The same thing with professors. Imagine somebody, a minister, trying to ridicule a professor, leading other professors into this country to fix its basic infrastructure into education. And those, again, 30 years in the Second Republic. Imagine all the way from Borno, it was the same combination from Borno and Lagos when, during the Second Republic, Alhaji Latif Jakande was relating directly with Borno of Mohamed Goni. Mohamed Goni was under GNPP, and Lagos was UPN. Progressive-minded people, and we need progressive-minded, and we have to take Nigeria to its rightful place, not the kind of foreign policies that kept Nigeria out of its role for 8 years. Imagine people now are going to talk about Ukraine, Russia, and Nigeria is not there. The foreign policy, the foreign ministry has failed us for
I don't know why this always happens.
Thank you.
We always wish we had a lot more time when we have you on or when we talk security with all you gentlemen, because it's always one very interesting point or two that we need to or try to always go to, but we just never really achieve these things. Again, we just have to thank you, Professor Khalifa Dekwa, Professor of Social Linguistics and International Relations. He joins us from our studios in Borno. And then we've also had Kabiru Adamu, Managing Director of Beacon Consulting Limited, as well as Dr. Bala Hassan, retired AIG Lecturer, Department of Psychology, University of Lagos. Gentlemen, we thank you all for your time and, most importantly, for your patience today. Thank you all, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Ambali.
All right, so but we started out the show today by asking you to just try and see if you could fill in the gap. Try for size. Those images that showed up on your screen right here behind us, we did tell you, name those, try. And guess what? A few people did, but a few people got the answers. And, well, some were just being cheeky, but, well, guys, let's see. Which one comes up first now? So, because we have quite a number just in front of us here. So, I see Pius Adeshaki. Well, you named 8.
Yes.
And
Anthony Francis named 9. Ayo, I'm trying to look at this name now. Ayowe Ayobaha named all 10. The question is, when did he get the... Well, I understand that he named names that were not even on the list, so...
I think the same thing with Bankole Abe, who also named 11.
11. There are only 10 people
Adeleke Hassan had 9.
9.
Akpetamo Miracle? Wow, look at that. What did he do there?
My picture is not there, please. Neither is Chamberlain, so...
Oh, boy. But guess who? Donald, thumbs up to you, Donald.
Yeah.
Donald Glasgow.
Yeah, got all 10.
All 10, Donald. Very interesting. Fantastic there. So there you go. Very interesting one. So once in a while, you never know. I mean, it's good to try some of these things because, hey, if you underestimate yourselves, you
we actually hope that it will spur, people to go and, read a bit more about the heroes of June 12. And, of course, get all of us interested in our democracy. It's not the end of the road. It's work in progress. We need to keep working at it to get the kind of democracy that we truly deserve.
I'll try with security faces. So Kabiri won't be there to give me some expo.
Oh, well.
Well, that is it today. We do Thank you all for watching 2023 Democracy Day. We've come to you live from Lagos, Abuja. We've had guests in Maiduguri as well. But it's a pleasure, and we have to thank you all for watching. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
I'm Malcolm Yusuf. Thank you so much for watching tonight.
You guys almost forgot us over here. We're still here.
Yeah. They took it right out. It's a work in progress. I want to thank all those who joined us, all our panelists from across the country, and all our studio audience, those who stayed back and took the program to the end. Please, a round of applause for you. Thank you for staying with us. And, of course, all the production crew, everyone who worked behind the scenes to make tonight's program a success. I'm Ladia Keriduluale.
And we are reminded of the work that lies ahead. Let's continue to put our best to make this country great and greater. Thank you for watching Channels Television. I'm Millicent Walker.
Good night.
Thank you.